Chapter 1339. Because Hu Yun and 100 Blossoms were able to display more and more strength, their battles against their own selves became more and more intense, and the techniques they used became more and more beautiful. This brilliance caused their battlefield to become wider and wider. At first, it was only a few dozen miles in radius, but after a short while, it had expanded to tens of thousands of miles in radius. Moreover, because of the impact of the battle between them, the degree of chaos within this area had reached a level that could stun anyone. Even they themselves had to be careful in this battle, for fear that they would be injured by the impact of the battle between others if they were not careful. In this process, they were completely focused on the opponent in front of them and no longer paid attention to the situation around them. They did not care whether their two companions won or lost, lived or died. Compared to them, Luo Fan's performance was much more relaxed. The battle between the two Luo Fans was also extremely fierce, but because their martial arts attainments had reached an incredible level, there were no flashes of the aftermath of their battle. One could only see the worlds and the surface of their bodies being annihilated one by one, and one could only see them occasionally punching each other and kicking each other. It was completely like a battle between ordinary martial arts masters. Of course, it was just a formality. The various martial arts mysteries revealed in the battle were beyond the imagination of ordinary martial arts masters. Any movement between the two of them was enough to make anyone who saw it cultivate from zero to obtain immortality. This performance was worlds apart from Baihua's and Baihua's performance. However, this was also normal. Although Baihua and Hu Yun were both pseudo-sage-level existences with unfathomable combat skills, they did not specialize in martial arts like Luo Fan, after all. At least, they did not study martial arts so deeply that they could almost form their own worldview. Naturally, they could perform mysteriously and unpredictably in low-intensity battles. However, once the battle reached such a high intensity, such as when they were fighting against their other selves, the nature of their low martial arts attainments was naturally exposed. It was also because of this that they displayed a completely different fighting style from Luo Fan. The three of them fought their own battles, each focused on their own opponent, unable to pay attention to the others. If this situation continued, when the battle ended, they might not even know who had won. Was it the real body, or was it a clone created by this stage? It was obvious that such a battle would not end in a short time. The scope of their battle was getting wider and wider. As a result, more and more creatures were stirred up, although the vast majority of living beings were no match for them. However, the world was so vast, and there were so many living beings in it. Of course, it was impossible for all living beings to be inferior to them. On this day, after fighting for more than a month, the area they affected finally drew the displeasure of a powerful being. In an instant, a peerlessly terrifying aura suddenly appeared out of thin air, directly enveloping the entire world, enveloping the entire battlefield. This aura was so terrifying that even in this strange world where it was under incredible restrictions, it still displayed an inconceivable and mysterious phenomenon. They saw a boundless world instantly enveloped the six of them. It was a boundless starry sky. The starry sky was filled with endless destructive power. The countless stars that existed in the entire starry sky seemed to be completely condensed from destructive power. Even though they were extremely far away, the light that seeped out also made them feel an indescribable pressure. "You guys are too noisy." A faint and somewhat leisurely voice suddenly rang in the ears of the six people present. Seeing this, the six of them immediately returned to their senses from the battle. In a situation where there was a power that surpassed their imagination, they were not fools. How could they still limit their sights to their own opponents? Naturally, they had to first deal with the opponents that were a threat to all of them before settling their own disputes. The six of them instinctively split into two sides. Luo Fan, Baihua, and Hu Yun were on one side, while their clones were on the other side, facing them from afar. "May I know why you're interfering with our personal grievances?" Luo Fan asked calmly. "I don't care about your personal grievances, but not only did you disturb my rest, but you also almost destroyed my cave abode. This has something to do with me, the voice said calmly. As it spoke, the figure of an old man with fluttering long sleeves appeared between them. This figure was not a real entity, but it was not considered a phantom either. It looked like a real entity, but it also felt somewhat illusory. Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat when he saw this figure. This was actually a condensed form. In essence, it was an existence of the same nature as this boundless starry sky. However, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that such an existence was not stronger than his aura, but its structure in nature made him feel puzzled and incomprehensible. In other words, the strength that the person in front of him displayed, or the strength that he could display, was at most a level 3 pseudo-sage. However, with such strength, he could change things beyond Luo Fan's imagination, which made Luo Fan feel unfathomable and unfathomable. Could it be a level 9 pseudo-sage? Luo Fan was secretly shocked, but his expression did not change. He said, "I see. I am willing to apologize for this." Since Luo Fan could see it himself, the others naturally could as well, so they all agreed. Among them, the most enthusiastic one was the other Luo Fan. "Apologize? No need. I'm already interested now. Why don't I play with you guys? Don't you guys have personal grudges? Why don't I help you solve your personal grudges? Each of you will take my attack. If you can survive, it will be considered a victory. If you die, it will be considered a failure. In this way, it will be clear who will live and who will die, and the personal grudges will naturally be settled," the figure said. His words made the expressions of the people present change slightly. Fellow Taoist, you're going too far. Don't think that you're great just because you were strong before. No matter how strong you were before, the strength that you can display now is only equivalent to the strength of the 3rd stage. Why are you pretending to be strong?" The other Luo Fan said calmly at this moment. Luo Fan originally wanted to say something like this, but he did not because he had some scruples in his heart. The other Luo Fan did not seem to have any scruples and said whatever he thought of. These words, this made the old man laugh out loud. "Not bad, not bad. Originally, I thought that this was just an ordinary experiment. Now, it seems that this experiment was a real test." Smiling, he suddenly said this. These words revealed a feeling of unease in Luo Fan's heart. Luo Fan's expression could not help but change slightly. "What do you mean, fellow Taoist?" Inbaiwa was a level 7 pseudo-sage. She was more familiar with this place than Luo Fan and Hu Yun, so she was more concerned about the changes in this stage than the two of them. After hearing the old man's words, she was more nervous than the others and hurriedly asked, "Ha ha, you're just pawns. You don't have a right to know." Although the old man appeared to be quite kind, his words were so impolite that Inbaiwa, who was used to being high and mighty, had a cold expression on her face. After the old man finished speaking, his figure slowly turned into a void. Then, it disappeared without a trace. As it disappeared, the aura of the starry sky instantly skyrocketed by countless times. In the blink of an eye, it broke through the limit of level 3 pseudo-sage and directly advanced towards level 4 pseudo-sage, level 5 pseudo-sage, level 6 pseudo-sage, level 7, level 8, and even level 9 pseudo-sage. In just a short while, this imposing aura disappeared. The aura of a level 3 pseudo-saint had turned into a level 9 pseudo-saint. Such a change in aura was truly earth-shattering, directly suppressing everyone present. Even Inbaiwa, who was a level 7 pseudo-sage, was so powerful. Under such a terrifying aura, he could only tremble in fear. He couldn't do anything, nor could he use any methods to resist. 6 people, 2 of them were Luo Fan, 2 of them were Inbaiwa, and 2 of them were Huyun's. At this moment, they were like statues, frozen in this increasingly terrifying and destructive starry sky. At this time, the 6 of them didn't know what expression they should use to face such a terrifying aura. It's indeed a level 9 pseudo-sage. Luo Fan only had this thought at this time. Looking at the gazes of the other 5 people, they should have the same or similar thoughts following that a large hand appeared out of thin air and slowly grabbed at the six of them. This large hand was only 10 feet in size. Compared to battles that could easily create worlds and cover hundreds of millions of miles, it really wasn't too big. However, such a large hand was enough to grab all 6 of them and crush them to pieces. As this large hand continued to approach, Luo Fan felt an indescribable sense of crisis shrouding him. He didn't know how long it had been since he felt this kind of danger. Previously, even when he encountered a level 7 pseudo-sage enemy during the inheritance test of the Buddha Supreme, he didn't have such a strong feeling. Even when he encountered a real level 9 pseudo-sage in the past, the sense of crisis was far from this level. After such a long time, he felt an indescribable feeling when he encountered such a crisis again. Instead, a faint bitter smile appeared on his face. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the 2 pairs of eyes that were looking at him seemed to have some emotions in them. This emotion was called anger. It was as if a giant dragon was being provoked by an ant, and it was enraged. As their gazes changed, the 100 feet long hand that was attacking them suddenly crumbled. Completely, from the inside to the outside, he turned into dust that could not be cleaned up, crumbling like powder. Amidst the collapse, a muffled groan came from nowhere. Following that, countless densely packed cracks appeared in the destroyed starry sky. They covered the entire starry sky and affected every inch of the starry sky. These cracks were initially undetectable, but as time passed, they became more and more obvious, and the cracks became bigger and bigger. In the end, all the cracks finally tore the entire starry sky apart, turning into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. In the world around Luo Fan and the others, the world was restored to its original state before they were shrouded by the imposing aura. In other words, they had re-entered that strange stage. Only around them, the substantial aura fragments were scattered everywhere. Under the influence of the world and space-time, they continued to shatter and collapse, gradually disappearing between heaven and earth. Ultimate God, you've finally recovered. Ha! Let's see how long you can hide. If you don't come out today, I'll destroy all your chess pieces. An extremely carefree shout came from nowhere and resounded throughout the entire world. The entire world. It made the world tremble violently in this voice. It was as if the world could not withstand the impact of such a voice and was about to collapse and be destroyed with the impact of this voice. The world's originally indestructible space-time and indestructible laws and principles seemed to have become as fragile as tofu at this moment. In an instant, it was riddled with holes, causing the entire world to completely lose its original stable appearance. The moment the world underwent such a change, Luo Fan and the other 2 felt that the suppression effect on their bodies had suddenly disappeared. Although Luo Fan had completely restored his level 3 pseudo-holy cultivation, he was still in this world after all and was still limited by this world. This could be seen from the fact that he could not destroy the world itself, because Baihua's performance was even more obvious. She was originally a level 7 pseudo-holy existence, but she was previously suppressed to level 2 pseudo-holy. One could imagine how terrifying the suppression she was under was. At this moment, as the suppression gradually disappeared, one could imagine just how terrifying the improvement he would receive would be. Almost with every breath, the aura on her body seemed to jump up. In a short while, she had reached the level 7 pseudo-holy realm. On the other side, Huyin was about the same. In the blink of an eye, she had regained her level 3 pseudo-holy might. Although her aura was the weakest among the 3, it was still more than 100 times stronger than before. In contrast to the changes of Luo Fan and the others, the 3 clones opposite them seemed to have been destroyed to the extent that they could not even maintain their own existence. Their bodies trembled slightly, as if they could collapse at any time. Faced with such a situation, Luo Fan and the other 2 didn't even need to discuss. They each made their move and cast their divine abilities on their other selves. On one side, they were completely unsuppressed and could perfectly unleash the power of their god arts. On the other side, the essence of their existence was affected, and even their own existence was shaken. They needed to suppress it to survive. Was there any need to say the outcome of this battle? Although the three clones on the other side managed to condense their god arts to resist, they still could not avoid the fate of being completely erased by Luo Fan and the others. This time, although the magic power that the three of them used was not the most powerful magic power that they had used since entering this world, the effect it produced was unprecedented since they entered this world. A large area of space-time and a large area of laws was instantly erased by their actions. Even after they retracted their god arts, the destructive power continued to gather and change at the point of effect, evolving into all kinds of strange sceneries, and even turning into space-time and giving birth to countless living beings. This was the true destructive power of the pseudo-holy realm. When he felt the effect of his magical power, even Luo Fan felt a burst of comfort. The feeling of being able to unleash his power perfectly without being suppressed was simply too wonderful. Indeed, one would only know how to cherish something after losing it, the art to die. A very slow and grand voice suddenly sounded, as if it was spat out by an incomparably huge creature. Compared to the previous voice, which only destroyed the laws of this world and the space-time of this world, this voice, which only said 3 words, instantly destroyed the entire world. This world, which originally still had some form, suddenly turned into countless fragments like a piece of paper being torn apart by a giant hand. Moreover, these countless fragments also continued to collapse at the same time. In the end, they turned into a fine fog, forming a dusky area, wrapping around Luo Fan and the other 2, who were similarly shaken by this sound to the point of vomiting blood, unable to control themselves. Ha ha! As expected, the will has been awakened. I've finally waited for it. A loud laughter sounded out of nowhere and constantly echoed in the mist. This caused Luo Fan and the others, who were already vomiting blood, to suffer another violent impact. The blood that had already stopped spurting out of their mouths once again. I'm still too weak. At this moment, this was the only thought in Luo Fan's mind, and there was only a bitter smile on his face. Chapter 1340. Because Hu Yun and 100 Blossoms were able to display more and more strength, their battles against their own selves became more and more intense, and the techniques they used became more and more beautiful. This brilliance caused their battlefield to become wider and wider. At first, it was only a few dozen kilometers, but after a short while, it had expanded to tens of thousands of kilometers. Moreover, because of the impact of the battle between them, the degree of chaos within this area had reached a level that could stun anyone. Even they themselves had to be careful in this battle, lest they be hurt by the impact of the battle between others. This process made them completely focused on the opponent in front of them, and no longer paid attention to the situation around them. They did not care whether their 2 companions won or lost, lived or died. Compared to them, Luo Fan's performance was much more relaxed. The battle between the 2 Luo Fans was equally tragic, but because their martial attainments had reached an unimaginable level, there were no aftershocks from their battle. One could only see the worlds on the surface of their bodies being annihilated. One could only see them occasionally punching each other and kicking each other. It was completely like a battle between ordinary martial arts masters. Of course, this was only in terms of form. The various mysteries of martial arts revealed during the battle were not something that ordinary martial arts masters could imagine. Even the slightest movement between the 2 of them was enough to make anyone who saw it cultivate from 0 to obtain immortality. This performance was world apart from Baihhua's and Baihhua's performance. However, this was also normal. Although Baihua and Hu Yun were both pseudo-sage level existences and their combat skills were unfathomable, they did not specialize in martial arts like Luo Fan. After all, at least they did not study martial arts so deeply that they could almost form their own worldview. Naturally, they could perform mysteriously and unpredictably in low-intensity battles. However, once the battle reached such a high intensity, such as when they were fighting against their other selves, The nature of their low martial arts attainments was naturally exposed. It was also because of this that they displayed a completely different fighting style from Luo Fan. The three of them fought their own battles, each focused on their own opponent, unable to pay attention to the others. If this situation continued when the battle ended, they might not even know who had won. Was it the real body, or was it a clone created by this stage? It was obvious that such a battle would not end in a short time. The scope of their battle was getting wider and wider. As a result, more and more creatures were stirred up, although the vast majority of living beings were no match for them. However, the world was so vast, and there were so many living beings in it. Of course, it was impossible for all living beings to be inferior to them. On this day, after fighting for more than a month, the area they affected finally drew the displeasure of a powerful being. In an instant, a peerlessly terrifying aura suddenly appeared out of thin air, directly enveloping the entire world, enveloping the entire battlefield. This aura was so terrifying that even in this strange world where it was under incredible restrictions, it still displayed an inconceivable and mysterious phenomenon. They saw a boundless world instantly enveloped the six of them. It was a boundless starry sky. The starry sky was filled with endless destructive power. The countless stars that existed in the entire starry sky seemed to be completely condensed from destructive power. Even though they were extremely far away, the light that seeped out also made them feel an indescribable pressure. "You guys are too noisy." A faint and somewhat leisurely voice suddenly rang in the ears of the six people present. Seeing this, the six of them immediately returned to their senses from the battle. In a situation where there was a power that surpassed their imagination, they were not fools. How could they still limit their sights to their own opponents? Naturally, they had to first deal with the opponents that were a threat to all of them before settling their own disputes. The six of them instinctively split into two sides. Luo Fan, Imbaiwa, and Huyun were on one side, while their clones were on the other side, facing them from afar. "May I know why you're interfering with our personal grievances?" Luo Fan asked calmly. "I don't care about your personal grievances, but not only did you disturb my rest, but you also almost destroyed my cave abode. This has something to do with me," the voice said calmly. As it spoke, the figure of an old man with fluttering long sleeves appeared between them. This figure was not a real entity, but it was not considered a phantom either. It looked like a real entity, but it also felt somewhat illusory. Luo Fan's heart skipped a beat when he saw this figure. This was actually a condensed form. In essence, it was an existence of the same nature as this boundless starry sky. However, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that such an existence was not stronger than his aura, but its structure in nature made him feel puzzled and incomprehensible. In other words, the strength that the person in front of him displayed, or the strength that he could display, was at most a level 3 pseudo-sage. However, with such strength, he could change things beyond Luo Fan's imagination, which made Luo Fan feel unfathomable and unfathomable. Could it be a level 9 pseudo-sage? Luo Fan was secretly shocked, but his expression did not change. He said, "I see. I am willing to apologize for this." Since Luo Fan could see it himself, the others naturally could as well, so they all agreed. Among them, the most enthusiastic one was the other Luo Fan. "Apologize? No need. I'm already interested now. Why don't I play with you guys? Don't you guys have personal grudges? Why don't I help you solve your personal grudges? Each of you will take my attack. If you can survive, it will be considered a victory. If you die, it will be considered a failure. In this way, it will be clear who will live and who will die, and the personal grudges will naturally be settled," the figure said. His words made the expressions of the people present change slightly. Fellow Taoist, you're going too far. Don't think that you're great just because you were strong before. No matter how strong you were before, the strength that you can display now is only equivalent to the strength of the third stage. Why are you pretending to be strong?" The other Luo Fan said calmly at this moment. Luo Fan originally wanted to say something like this, but he did not because he had some scruples in his heart. The other Luo fan did not seem to have any scruples and said whatever he thought of. These words. This made the old man laugh out loud. Not bad, not bad. Originally, I thought that this was just an ordinary experiment. Now, it seems that this experiment was a real test. Smiling, he suddenly said this. These words revealed a feeling of unease in Luo Fan's heart. Luo Fan's expression could not help but change slightly. What do you mean, fellow Taoist? Inbaiwa was a level 7 pseudo-sage. She was more familiar with this place than Luo Fan and Hu Yun, so she was more concerned about the changes in this stage than the two of them. After hearing the old man's words, she was more nervous than the others and hurriedly asked, "Ha ha, you're just pawns. You don't have a right to know." Although the old man appeared to be quite kind, his words were so impolite that Inbaiwa, who was used to being high and mighty, had a cold expression on her face. After the old man finished speaking, his figure slowly turned into a void. Then, it disappeared without a trace. As it disappeared, the aura of the starry sky instantly skyrocketed by countless times. In the blink of an eye, it broke through the limit of level 3 pseudo-sage and directly advanced towards level 4 pseudo-sage, level 5 pseudo-sage, level 6 pseudo-sage, level 7, level 8, and even level 9 pseudo-sage. In just a short while, this imposing aura disappeared. The aura of a level 3 pseudo-saint had turned into a level 9 pseudo-saint. Such a change in aura was truly earth-shattering, directly suppressing everyone present. Even Inbaiwa, who was a level 7 pseudo-sage, was so powerful. Under such a terrifying aura, he could only tremble in fear. He couldn't do anything, nor could he use any methods to resist. 6 people, 2 of them were Luo Fan, 2 of them were Inbaiwa, and 2 of them were Huyun's. At this moment, they were all like statues, frozen in this increasingly terrifying and destructive starry sky. At this time, the 6 of them didn't know what expression they should use to face such a terrifying aura. It's indeed a level 9 pseudo-sage. Luo Fan only had this thought at this time. Looking at the gazes of the other 5 people, they should have the same or similar thoughts. Following that, a large hand appeared out of thin air and slowly grabbed at the 6 of them. This large hand was only 10 feet in size. Compared to battles that could easily create worlds and cover hundreds of millions of miles, it was really not too big. However, such a large hand was enough to grab all 6 of them and crush them to pieces. As this large hand continued to approach, Luo Fan felt an indescribable sense of danger shrouding him. He didn't know how long it had been since he felt this kind of danger. Previously, even when he encountered a level 7 pseudo-sage enemy in the inheritance test of the Buddhist Supreme, he didn't have such a strong feeling. Even when he encountered a real level 9 pseudo-sage in the past, the sense of danger was far from this level. After being separated for such a long time, he suddenly felt an indescribable feeling for a moment. Instead, a faint, bitter smile appeared on his face. At this moment, he suddenly felt that the 2 pairs of eyes that were looking at him seemed to have some color in them. This emotion was called anger. It was as if a giant dragon was being provoked by an ant, and it was enraged. As their gazes changed, the 100 feet long hand that was attacking them suddenly crumbled. Completely from the inside to the outside, he turned into dust that could not be cleaned up, crumbling like powder. Amidst the collapse, a muffled groan came from nowhere. Following that, countless densely packed cracks appeared in the destroyed starry sky. They covered the entire starry sky and affected every inch of the starry sky. These cracks were initially undetectable, but as time passed, they became more and more obvious, and the cracks became larger and larger. In the end, all the cracks tore the entire starry sky apart, turning it into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. In the world around Luo Fan and the others, the world was restored to its original state before they were shrouded by the imposing aura. In other words, they had re-entered that strange stage. Only around them, the substantial aura fragments were scattered everywhere. Under the influence of the world and space-time, They continued to shatter and collapse, gradually disappearing between heaven and earth. Ultimate God, you finally recovered. Ha ha! Let's see how long you can hide. If you don't come out today, I'll destroy all your chess pieces. An extremely carefree shout came from nowhere and resounded throughout the entire world. The entire world. It made the world tremble violently in this voice. It was as if the world could not withstand the impact of such a voice and was about to collapse and be destroyed with the impact of this voice. The world's originally indestructible space-time and indestructible laws and principles seemed to have become as fragile as tofu at this moment. In an instant, it was riddled with holes, causing the entire world to completely lose its original stable appearance. The moment the world underwent such a change, Luo Fan and the other two felt that the suppression effect on their bodies had suddenly disappeared. Although Luo Fan had completely restored his level 3 pseudo-holy cultivation, he was still in this world after all and was still limited by this world. This could be seen from the fact that he could not destroy the world itself, because Bai Hua's performance was even more obvious. She was originally a level 7 pseudo-holy existence, but she was previously suppressed to a level 2 pseudo-holy existence. One could imagine how terrifying the suppression was. At this moment, as the suppression gradually disappeared, one could imagine just how terrifying the improvement he would receive would be. Almost with every breath, the aura on her body leaped up as if it was jumping. In a short while, she had reached the level 7 pseudo-holy realm. On the other side, Huyin was about the same. In the blink of an eye, she had regained her level 3 pseudo-holy might. Although her aura was the weakest among the three, it was still more than 100 times stronger than before. In contrast to the changes that happened to Luo Fan and the others, the three clones opposite them seemed to have been destroyed to the extent that they could not even maintain their own existence. Their bodies trembled slightly, as if they could collapse at any time. Faced with such a situation, Luo Fan and the other two didn't even need to discuss. They each made their move and cast their divine abilities on their other selves. On one side, they were completely unsuppressed and could perfectly unleash the power of their god arts. On the other side, the essence of their existence was affected, and even their own existence was shaken. They needed to suppress it to survive. Was there any need to say the outcome of this battle? Although the three clones on the other side managed to condense their god arts to resist, they still could not avoid the fate of being completely erased by Luo Fan and the others. This time, although the magic power that the three of them used was not the most powerful magic power that they had used since entering this world, the effect it produced was unprecedented since they entered this world. A large area of space-time and a large area of laws was instantly erased by their actions. Even after they retracted their god arts, the destructive power continued to gather and change at the point of effect, evolving into all sorts of strange sceneries. It even turned into space-time and gave birth to countless living beings. This was the true destructive power of the pseudo-holy realm. When he felt the effect of his magical power, even Luo Fan felt a burst of comfort. The feeling of being able to perfectly unleash his power without any suppression was simply too wonderful. Indeed, one would only know how to cherish something after losing it. Thou art to die. A very slow and grand voice suddenly sounded, as if it was spat out by an incomparably huge creature. Compared to the previous voice, which only destroyed the laws of this world and the space-time of this world, this voice, which only said 3 words, instantly destroyed the entire world. This world, which originally still had some form, suddenly turned into countless fragments like a piece of paper being torn apart by a giant hand. Moreover, these countless fragments also continued to collapse at the same time. In the end, they turned into a fine fog, forming a dusky area, wrapping around Luo Fan and the other two, who were similarly shaken by this sound to the point of vomiting blood, unable to control themselves. Ha ha! As expected, the will has been awakened. I finally waited for it. A burst of laughter sounded out of nowhere and constantly echoed in the mist. This caused Luo, Fan, and the others, who were already vomiting blood, to suffer another violent impact. The blood that had already stopped spurting out of their mouths once again. I'm still too weak. At this moment, this was the only thought in Luo Fan's mind, and there was only a bitter smile on his face. Chapter 1341. In an instant, an old man appeared in the dusky fog. Judging by the appearance of this old man, it was the same old man who had suppressed Luo Fan and the others earlier. However, at this moment, the old man no longer looked as calm as before. Instead, he looked extremely stern, and his eyes flickered with a frightening coldness. After the old man appeared, he naturally suppressed everyone present. An extremely powerful aura spread from his body, distorting the surrounding space-time. The space-time that had originally collapsed and scattered condensed around his body once more, directly constructing a space-time that contained him. At this moment, a powerful force was born from nothingness and directly acted on that space-time. That space-time suddenly shook violently. Countless fragments of the world continued to scatter from the space-time around the old man's body. Bit by bit, it was as if they were scraping a part of the world from the world. However, every time a bit of it was scraped off, the old man's body would tremble slightly. In an instant, space-time would appear and replenish that world, restoring it to its peak state. This process continued endlessly, and it seemed like it would continue forever. "You want to subdue me with such a trick?" the old man said with a calm expression. His voice was filled with a cold intent. As these words were spoken, an extremely illusory, extremely fair, and even white, jade-like palm appeared from nothingness. It slowly reached towards the old man, raised 2 fingers, and squeezed the world around the old man's body. This action, this posture, although it was not targeted at Luo Fan. Regardless of whether it was Luo Fan, Inbaiwa, or Huyun, they all felt an indescribable malice from this. Just this posture alone was enough to make the 3 of them feel like they could not bear it. It was as if just this light image that was transmitted into their hearts was enough to cause great damage to their souls. It was enough to make their souls collapse. What method is this? At this moment, Luo Fan tightly closed his eyes. At this moment, his spirit was incomparably condensed, producing an indescribable, awe-inspiring force that suddenly rushed towards the light shadow that existed in his spirit. With a posture of mutual destruction, he smashed the shadow of the palm into pieces. Only then did he feel a wave of relief. Of course, his heart was still hurt. Although he was already relaxed, he still didn't dare to open his eyes again. Instead, his power surged, drawing down the dusky existence in the gap between heaven and earth and the primal chaos. In an instant, he outlined a grayish, 3-dimensional talisman around his body. He defended himself from head to toe. Subsequently, only then did he carefully circulate his spirit, slowly replenishing the damage to his heart forest, slowly allowing his lustful spirit to return to its original perfect state. After a long while, he slowly opened his eyes. He looked towards the direction where all sorts of terrifying fluctuations were constantly being emitted. With the protection of the grayish, 3-dimensional talisman around his body, when he looked outside, it was as if he was looking at things through sunglasses. Although the brightness of the things he saw was much lower than normal, many harmful things were blocked out. Therefore, when he looked at the confrontation between the old man and the huge hand, the light shadow he saw was a little blurry. However, it was also because of this that he was still greatly shocked. He felt as if his spirit was constantly being attacked, but it was not like before, when his whole spirit was almost unable to bear it, as if it was about to completely collapse and be destroyed. It was just a strong pressure. At this moment, the huge hand had already tightly squeezed the world around an old man's body, constantly crushing and exerting force, making that world like a squeezed balloon, constantly splashing out all sorts of space-time fragments. However, at the same time, this balloon seemed to be constantly blowing air into it at the same time. No matter how many space-time fragments splashed out, the world itself was constantly being replenished by the space-time, and there was no loss because of this. In other words, there was not much consumption because of this. Is this all you've got? If that's the case, you might not even be able to deal with this clone of mine. The old man suddenly laughed coldly. His smugness made people think that he had gained the upper hand at this moment. Suddenly, Luo Fan heard a muffled groan beside him. He was shocked and turned to look, only to find that Hu Yun's face was as pale as a piece of paper, and the aura on her body was fluctuating violently. It was as if her whole body had become a bag of dynamite that could explode at any time. Seeing this, Luo Fan instantly understood that she was clearly unable to completely eliminate the light shadow in her heart. In the face of such a situation, he did not dare to be negligent. With a thought, he raised his hand to grab Hu Yun, and a powerful spirit force suddenly poured into her heart. Spirit force wasn't a power that existed in reality. Instead, it was an abstract, formless, and idealistic force. When such a power was poured into the other person's heart, it was equivalent to instantly connecting the two people's hearts. In an instant, countless light shadows flashed across Luo Fan's heart. The information contained in these light shadows was unimaginable. It was filled with Hu Yun's many past experiences. Clearly, these were Hu Yun's memories. Under normal circumstances, perhaps Luo Fan would be in the mood to observe these memories. However, at this moment, Hu Yun's heart could collapse at any time, and the power in her body could not be controlled and suddenly burst out. How could he have the mood to pay attention to what these memories were? As he searched, he found the terrifying giant hand that was wreaking havoc in her heart. Fortunately, Hu Yun's reaction was also extremely fast, and she did not look at the giant hand for too long. After that, she even fought with the giant hand in her heart for a long time. Now, although she was about to lose, she had caused great damage to the phantom of the hand, causing it to be far from its peak. Therefore, when Luo Fan's spirit fusion collided with the giant hand, the phantom of the giant hand was suddenly smashed into pieces. Although the force of the recoil made his face turn pale, and he almost vomited blood. However, he still managed to smash the giant hand into pieces, preventing the misfortune of Hu Yun's heart from collapsing. When all of this was done, Hu Yun's body softly fell down, and her entire body withered. Luo Fan looked. He casually pulled Hu Yun into his heaven and earth sleeve. With such severe damage to her heart, Hu Yun could no longer maintain a clear mind. She could only sink into a deep sleep, letting sleep slowly heal her heart. Although this process would not be too short, it would not be too long either. At most, it would take a few days, and that would be enough. With Hu Yun's experience, Luo Fan no longer dared to take it for granted that Yin Bai Hua could resist the giant hand's phantom like he could. He turned his head to the other side, and found that Yin Bai Hua's eyes were tightly shut, although the expression on his face was constantly changing. However, she did not show signs of exploding like Hu Yun did. Clearly, although Yin Bai Hua had yet to completely destroy the phantom in her heart, she had already stabilized her methods. She could steadily advance towards the direction of crushing the phantom, and there was no need for Luo Fan to do anything. After waiting for a while, she would naturally be able to completely recover like Luo Fan. Seeing this, he let out a sigh of relief. Since Yin Bai Hua could solve her own problem, he naturally did not need to help her. Using spiritual force to stab into another person's heart wasn't a method that could be used under normal circumstances. If Yin Bai Hua couldn't solve it herself, Luo Fan naturally had to help her. However, since Yin Bai Hua could solve it herself, he wasn't willing to do so. Forget about anything else, he might even do it right now. Because Yin Bai Hua would feel that he was meddlesome, and even think that he had peeped into her memories. If she was unhappy, she would instead become enemies with Luo Fan. This was a strenuous and unrewarding task. How could Luo Fan do it? Even as he thought this, Luo Fan didn't give up. Yin Bai Hua didn't care. With a thought, he once again drew down a grayish existence from the gap between heaven and earth and the state of chaos. With a slight turn, it constructed a three-dimensional talisman that was exactly the same as the one around his body. It directly wrapped around Yin Bai Hua. This 3D talisman could not only block light, it could also defend against some attacks that weren't too powerful. It could be considered as giving Embark a layer of defense. At this moment, the strange voice that was spat out from the mouth of the behemoth sounded again. This place, where even time and space had already been destroyed, seemed to be crushed by a terrifying existence at this moment. It took a step towards a deeper level of destruction. It was originally a dense fog, but at this moment, it became a vast expanse of gray. Following this voice, the giant hand that was crushing the world around the old man's body seemed to be covered in a layer of green light. An indescribable feeling of power came from it. Then, the world around the old man's body was instantly crushed like a piece of paper. In fact, as it was crushed, the old man's body was crushed as well. "Found you." A rather calm voice rang out from nowhere. Then, countless figures suddenly appeared in this area that had already become hazy. There were old and young figures, men and women, tall and short, fat and thin, beautiful and ugly. There were all kinds of shapes and sizes, and there were all kinds of strange shapes and sizes. Almost every possible human being that existed in this world was included in the figures. After these figures appeared, they each raised their hands and slapped at a certain spot in the void. Every one of these figures was extremely powerful. In Luo Fan's opinion, they were at least not weaker than the old man from before. They were both at the level 9 pseudo-saint rank. The effect of these countless existences slapping at a certain spot in the void was imaginable how terrifying it was. At this moment, Luo Fan felt as if he had once again seen the great change of the scene when Pangu created the world. Even through the layer of 3D talisman around his body, he could clearly feel that the movements of the figures had been deeply engraved in his heart. Even in his heart, it was constantly impacting and shaking his heart. It had actually caused an effect that was similar to the effect that the big hand had brought to his heart before. It made him feel that his heart could not contain these images at all, and it was as if his heart was going to collapse due to the impact of these images. It was the tragic consequence of his mind being completely destroyed. However, fortunately, these figures were separated into many parts, and they were not as concentrated as the giant hand from before. Luo Fan slightly focused his mind, and with a slight collision, he had already crushed those images one by one, causing the impact of those images on him to be weakened to the lowest level. After a short while, they were completely expelled. Compared to the previous method of destroying the image of the giant hand with mutual destruction, this time, it was different. Luo Fan's method of crushing these countless lights and shadows was even more thorough, but it was extremely miraculous. It allowed his soul to receive some kind of indescribable baptism during this process, making his soul become transparent and pure. Faintly, there was an indescribable impulse to increase his cultivation realm. I didn't expect to have such an unexpected gain. Luo Fan was not very happy at this time. Instead, he had extremely complicated feelings in his heart. It was naturally a good thing that he could make progress and gain benefits. But don't forget how he made progress. How did he gain benefits? His heart couldn't take it just because he saw the projection of a certain existence casting a divine ability. He needed to focus all of his spirit to attack, to resist, and to crush these light figures. Only then would he be able to crush them. Only by expelling them could he gain some benefits in the process, allowing his heart to receive some baptism. In such a situation, it was easy to see just how terrifying and shocking the gap between him and the person who used the divine ability was. It could be said that, from another perspective, the more benefits he gained, the greater the gap between him and the existence in front of him. In such a situation, how could Luo Fan be excited about these benefits? After clearing away all the abnormalities in his mind, he looked forward and saw the effects of the techniques that the countless figures had unleashed. He saw that at the place where those figures were taking pictures, the nothingness was broken, revealing layers of space-time. And these space-time were also broken layer by layer, revealing a scene that looked like layers of overlapping book pages. Finally, it led to an extremely strange space-time. Luo Fan glanced over and instantly counted the number of layers of space-time. Although there were countless layers in general, they were divided into 33 major layers. A supreme and powerful aura seeped out from the broken nothingness, instantly enveloping a large area, completely covering everything in the area. Even Luo Fan, who was wrapped in the three-dimensional talisman, felt an astonishing pressure. It was as if the aura could crush the three-dimensional talisman with just a slight fluctuation, turning his body, his soul, and everything else into nothingness. I can't stay here anymore. This was the only thought that flashed through Luo Fan's mind at this moment. I can't stay here anymore. At this moment, a voice rang in his ear. Luo Fan was shocked, and then he realized that the person who spoke must be Yin Baiwa. He glanced over, and sure enough, Yin Baiwa had already opened her eyes. Her expression was extremely calm, but there was a faint trace of fear and panic in her eyes. It was very obvious that she was not as calm as she appeared. It's just a bluff. Suddenly, countless voices intertwined to form this sentence. Following this voice, the terrifying aura that came from the broken passage in space-time trembled slightly and suddenly collapsed, as if it had never existed in the first place. This change shocked both Luo Fan and Yin Baiwa. At that moment, the hand, shrouded in azure light, trembled slightly and gradually transformed in the air. In the end, it turned into a childlike figure that quietly hovered in the air. It hovered in front of the huge hole that had been punched in the air, facing everyone present from afar. This child naturally looked like he was carved from jade and was unimaginably cute. Anyone who saw him would want to hug him and protect him as much as they could. However, in contrast to his unimaginably adorable appearance, his eyes were so cold that they seemed to be devoid of emotion. If it wasn't for the spiritual light in his eyes, one might have thought that they were the eyes of a dead man. Looks like this is all the power you've gathered over the years. It's nothing much. Another countless voices intertwined to form this sentence. As this sentence was said, the countless figures that had appeared in this place and shattered the void with their hands slowly condensed. Their numbers decreased until they turned into the figure of an old man. This old man looked exactly like the old man that had been crushed by the large hand earlier. After this old man appeared, an aura that was more than 100 times more powerful than the old man from before suddenly soared into the sky. This aura was not any weaker than the aura from the hole earlier. In fact, it vaguely contained an indescribable life force, and it seemed to be even more agile than the aura from the hole. It was as if one was life and the other was death. My disciple, why have you betrayed me? The child hovering in the void suddenly said. Chapter 1342. He you betray? You're saying that I'm betraying you? The old man grinned and said. His voice was filled with disdain and indescribable hatred. Countless thoughts ran through Luo Fan's mind when he heard this. He knew that there must be a lot of entanglements between the teacher and the disciple. If he were to dig deeper, there would definitely be a lot of things to talk about. However, he didn't have the mind to care about the entanglements between them at this moment. At this moment, he was more concerned about how he could escape this place. Between the teacher and the disciple, even the old man who was the disciple, he was a level 9 pseudo-sage. As for the childlike cultivator, just his voice and image alone was enough to make Luo Fan's mind unable to bear the impact and almost collapse. One could imagine how terrifying he was. When two such powerful existences were ready to fight at any time, as a weakling, if he still had the mind to find out what entanglements there were between the two of them, he would really be tired of living. Luo Fan had this kind of decisiveness, and 100 Flowers was not much worse off. At this moment, he connected his consciousness with Luo Fan and said, "This place is currently sealed by their auras, and we can't break through it all. Do you have any ideas?" Luo Fan had already noticed this, and his expression was rather ugly as he said, "This is the hardest thing to break through. Right now, their auras are clashing, and the destructive power is surging. It's fine if we don't move, but if we trigger their auras, it'll be the same as them attacking us at the same time. At that time, We won't be able to bear the impact, and we'll definitely die. Then what should we do? Hunter Flower's voice was somewhat panicked. Luo Fan said solemnly, "We can only wait now. The two of them aren't paying attention to us at all. To them, we're just ants. As long as we don't provoke them, they won't attack us. What we need to do now is wait for the two of them to fight, and see if there are any flaws in their auras." When Hunter Flowers heard this, her expression was still ugly, but she still nodded. He agreed with Luo Fan. This was the only choice they could make at this time. Unless the two of them could erupt with strength that was on par with the two of them, they could only tuck their tails between their legs and wait. This was the only feasible method. "I imparted you the great Tao and guided you to become a saint, yet you ambushed me at the last moment of my saint ascension. If this isn't betrayal, then what is betrayal?" The boy's expression was calm. His eyes were indifferent as he spoke. When he mentioned the sneak attack at the last moment of becoming a saint, his expression did not change at all. This was completely unlike the behavior of someone who had failed to become a saint after being ambushed at the last moment. Sainthood is everything. The ultimate goal of a cultivator was to be ambushed at the final juncture of becoming a sage. No matter how firm one's will was or how perfect one's Tao heart was, such an experience would definitely cause any cultivator to feel extreme hatred. Under normal circumstances, those who said such words would be filled with hatred and murderous intent. How could they be like the boy at this moment? His expression was calm, and his eyes were indifferent. It was as if he was not talking about himself, but someone else. Luo Fan and Inbaiwa were inexplicably shocked at this moment. The two of them looked at each other and saw an indescribable shock and a faint sense of despair in each other's eyes. Originally, they thought that no matter how powerful this person was, he would only be a relatively powerful level 9 pseudo-sage. After all, the level 9 pseudo-sage was an almost infinite realm. In such a realm, it was not impossible for some level 9 pseudo-sages to be thousands of times stronger than ordinary level 9 pseudo-sages. However, they did not expect that the person in front of them was actually an existence that almost succeeded in breaking through to the sage realm. There was already an essential difference between such an existence and ordinary level 9 pseudo-sages. Compared to a real sage, or even a sage from the demon realm, he was far inferior. The difference was tens of thousands of times. However, he already had enough strength to crush all level 9 pseudo-sages. After understanding how powerful it was, Luo Fan and Inbaiwa naturally couldn't help but have such thoughts in their hearts. Could they really seize the flaws of such a powerful existence and escape? It was also because of this thought that the two of them looked a little desperate at this moment. That was why they had such obvious and shocking expressions. "Lead me to become a sage?" Ha ha ha! The old man laughed out loud at this moment. The anger and hatred in his voice was unprecedentedly strong. It had even turned into a substance, forming a sea of blood that was so red that it was black. It rushed in all directions and enveloped the strange space-time where they were in the blink of an eye, turning this space-time into a boundless sea of blood. After such a sea of blood enveloped the entire space-time, it formed a strong and unparalleled pressure on all living beings in this space-time, namely Luo Fan and Inbaiwa. The emotions of anger and hatred directly washed over the hearts of Luo Fan and Inbaiwa, causing many negative emotions to appear in their hearts out of nowhere. At this moment, the sea of blood seemed to be under some kind of invisible pressure and collapsed. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared in the first place. As for the old man, he grunted and a cold smile appeared on his face. As expected, you haven't fully recovered your strength. You've only recovered a little bit of your willpower. In that case, I won't hold back anymore. Back then, you wanted to turn me into a resource for you to become a sage. Today, I'll let you have a taste of my anger and hatred. The old man roared. After that, the old man soared into the sky and suddenly charged towards the boy who was hovering in front of the hole that had been opened up in the void. Needless to say, his speed was so fast that it seemed to have surpassed time and space. Even Luo Fan and Yin Baihua only managed to catch a glimpse of a shadow before they discovered that the old man was already fighting with the boy. The battle between the two of them was brilliant and dazzling. Every time their powers came into contact, the waves emitted would destroy space-time and shatter heaven and earth. This was a boundless world. Although it was vast and powerful, it could not withstand such a battle. Even so, it could not withstand such a battle. After the waves spread out a few times, the entire world disappeared without a trace, and they appeared in another world. Although Luo Fan and Yin Baihua were extremely vigilant and had the three-dimensional talismans formed by the gray existence protecting them, they still could not completely isolate themselves from the effects of the aftershocks. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had been annihilated hundreds of times. If it wasn't for the fact that they were not ordinary cultivators and had the power to recover their bodies through special methods, they might have only been affected by the aftershocks. It was already enough to kill them both, destroy their Tao, and scatter their souls. There was no possibility for them to survive. Even so, the two of them had suffered a lot during the process. They had suffered a lot. Although it was only for a moment, the unimaginable pain they experienced made them feel as if they had experienced hundreds of millions of years. It was as if they had become ordinary people who had experienced countless years of torture in the depths of the 18 levels of hell. If it wasn't for the fact that their Tao hearts were perfect and stable, perhaps the pain alone was enough to make their minds collapse. It was already enough to cause their minds to collapse and completely erase all traces of their existence in their hearts. Nevertheless, they still managed to endure it. At the same time, as the world collapsed, they stepped into a brand new world. This was a brand new world. It was a boundless void, and on one side was a vast and boundless world. However, before the two of them could see the world clearly, the world was once again shattered by the aftermath of the battle. Everything in the world disappeared completely, and they once again experienced that indescribable pain as they once again entered a brand new world, a brand new world. This process happened again and again, again and again. In the end, it happened so many times that Luo Fan and Yin Baihua had completely lost the concept of what was happening. They felt as if they were experiencing pain and torment that was countless times longer than their own cultivation time. Their bodies were shattered again and again, and they were reunited again and again. Every time they were shattered and reunited, they thought that they had already reached their limits. If this continued, they would definitely die, and their souls would scatter. However, they would stand up resolutely after every time. They resolutely reunited their bodies and barely managed to stand up amidst the pain. Luo Fan did not know if Yin Baihua felt anything. But Luo Fan felt that this process was an indescribable form of refinement for his spirit. He continuously shattered his spirit, which he originally thought was perfect and flawless, and then reunited it with his powerful will. He removed some of the strange impurities, making his spirit even more perfect and flawless. As a result, he felt like his cultivation realm was slowly rising amidst this extremely painful and horrifying process. The spirit was the foundation of what made a living being a living being. For any living being, for any cultivator, all of their cultivation achievements had to be connected to their spirit in order to be meaningful. If their cultivation achievements eventually became independent and were not connected to their spirit at all, then cultivation would not be true cultivation. Those achievements would not be true achievements either. They would only be external objects. From this, one could tell just how important it was for a cultivator to sublimate and improve their spirit, to become more perfect and flawless. Perhaps Luo Fan's comprehension of cultivation had already reached a certain limit, but when his spirit improved, he would naturally gain new life through his comprehension of the great Tao. He would be able to refine new mysteries from it, and his cultivation realm would improve through this process. This was not difficult to understand. It was just like how a middle school student and a university student would definitely interpret the same textbook differently. In comparison, the university student would definitely gain more knowledge and gain more benefits. Of course, the middle school student and university student had to be competent for this to be valid. It was also because of this special characteristic that Luo Fan felt as if his cultivation realm was constantly rising even though his spirit was being broken and condensed again and again. The entire process continued for who knows how many tens of thousands of times. After his spirit was broken and reformed for who knows how many tens of thousands of times, Luo Fan suddenly felt his spirit become empty. An indescribable comfort surged into his heart. After a long while, he finally came back to his senses. It was not because of some mysterious change, nor was it because his body's sublimation brought him a comfortable feeling. It was unknowingly when the aftermath of the battle. It had already disappeared. The aftermath of the battle had brought him indescribable pain, making him feel as if his body and mind were constantly collapsing. This indescribable discomfort had lasted for so long that he had unknowingly become completely used to it. Now that the aftermath of the battle had suddenly disappeared, the indescribable pain was no longer produced. The difference between this and the indescribable pain was the source of this indescribable comfort. After coming back to his senses, he discovered that because Hunter Blossoms had a strange smile on his face, he seemed to also be enjoying this indescribable comfort. However, compared to Luo Fan, he was able to quickly come back to his senses. He knew the true source of this comfort. Because Hunter Blossoms didn't seem to have this ability, he still maintained that strange smile, completely immersed in that comfort, unable to come back to his senses for a long time. Luo Fan didn't pay much attention to him. Instead, he turned his gaze to the front, looking at the situation of the battle between the old man and the boy. At this moment, their auras were still sealing off their surroundings, perfectly sealing off all openings. He couldn't find any openings that could allow him to escape. This let him know that the master and disciple's battle definitely hadn't ended yet. And it was precisely because the battle hadn't ended yet that Luo Fan was extremely curious as to why they had stopped at this time. Normally speaking, with the hatred between the two of them, it really wasn't very likely that the battle would end until one of them died. Thou canst not defeat me. Come back to my side. I'll pass on my techniques to you and guide you to sainthood. Before he could clearly see what was happening in the middle of the battlefield, this voice was already transmitted into Luo Fan's ears. This voice was naturally the boy's voice. However, compared to the beginning, there seemed to be a hint of emotion in it. This emotion was very strange. It seemed to be joy, but also seemed to be anger. The voice itself was terrifyingly powerful, and with the addition of this hint of emotion, its power was even more shocking. In an instant, Luo Fan was immersed in that voice. He felt as if he was about to enter a strange and dazzling world. Fortunately, Luo Fan's spirit had experienced so many bitter tempering and was much stronger than before. In an instant, a glassy color flashed in the depths of his spirit, instantly pulling him out of that state and restoring his normal perspective. At this moment, he could finally see his surroundings clearly. This was a boundless void. In this void, countless space-time fragments transformed into balls of mist, and they were distributed everywhere in this void, illuminating this void to make it seem like the ruins of a battlefield. At this moment, both Luo Fan and Inbaiwa were wrapped in the fog formed by the space-time fragments. It seemed to be similar to the fog in other places. From the outside, it was impossible to see their existence at all. Of course, this was from an ordinary perspective. In the center of this void, in front of the layers of passageways that had been opened, the boy and the old man faced each other from afar. Both of their appearances were no different from when they first met. They had the same hairstyle, the same clothes, and the same demeanor. It was impossible to tell that they had experienced such a tragic battle before. This was natural, even for a pseudo-sage like Luo Fan. As long as he didn't die, it would be easy for him to change his appearance, let alone a 9th-level pseudo-sage existence. Compared to back then, the gazes of the two of them had changed subtly at this moment. In addition to anger and hatred, There was also an indescribable surprise in the old man's eyes. For the first time, there was emotion in the boy's eyes. It seemed to be joy and anger at the same time. It was extremely difficult to tell. Do you think I'll fall for your lies when I'm only one step away from destroying you? If that's really what you think, I'm afraid I'm disappointed in you. Divine Lord, said the old man as he let out a long sigh. My ability is beyond your understanding, said the boy faintly. Is that so? Perhaps you're stronger than me because you've touched the saint state. However, you're already dead now. Back then, you couldn't resist the repulsion of 54 saints, and even your life force completely collapsed. It took you trillions of years to condense this bit of true will again. How can you resist me? Said the old man faintly. Don't you understand that if I didn't condense a trace of holy decree, how could I be resurrected and return after so many years? I'll give you one last chance. If you kneel before me like you did before and kiss the ground in front of me, I'll let bygones be bygones, and I'll teach you the secrets of condensing holy will, the boy said calmly. Chapter 1343. However, compared to whether what they said was true or not, Luo Fan was more concerned about what the holy decree that the boy, the Divine Lord, was talking about was. From what he said, it seemed that after condensing a trace of the holy decree, one would be indestructible. Even after death, one could use this trace of the holy decree to come back to life. How could he not be concerned? Isn't it good that you have condensed the holy decree? I'll destroy your will now and snatch the holy decree that you condensed. Although I can't become a saint, I'll be able to understand more about the saint state. When I try to break through to the saint state in the future, I might have a higher chance of success, the old man said nonchalantly. You have indeed taken a liking to the trace of the holy decree that I condensed. Saying that He Wu wanted to turn you into a resource was just an excuse. Ha ha ha. The old man laughed and said, I admit that I did take a liking to the trace of the holy decree that you condensed. However, if you didn't want to turn me into a resource to become a saint and wanted to devour me, would I have ignored the billions of years of kindness and attacked you? All of this was caused by you. You're the one who forced me to divide myself into countless parts to hide for countless billions of years. You forced me to become a puppet in the trap you set up. I will definitely take everything you have away from you. I must make you regret what you did to me in the past. What a pity, what a pity, the boy said calmly. As he spoke, he raised his hand and made a grabbing motion in the air. Luo Fan, who was in the midst of the fog, felt something was wrong. Suddenly, he felt his body being grasped by an indescribable force. This power was unimaginably terrifying, and he couldn't even muster the slightest intention to resist. Before he could even react, he found that his body had already arrived in another area, between the boy and the old man. Two extremely powerful auras suddenly poured into his body, causing it to explode in an instant. However, very quickly, before he could react, one of the two auras suddenly turned around and condensed his body again, becoming complete again. Even more so, compared to before it exploded, it was much stronger. He was more complete, and more powerful. Then, another aura appeared. He was blasted away by that aura. It kept circling around his body. It was constantly looking for flaws, wanting to pour into his body once more and tear his body apart again. What are you going to do? Luo Fan asked. Before he could even open his mouth, he could only roar in his heart. Let me borrow your body and mind. A desolate voice instantly sounded in Luo Fan's heart. Then he felt that his body, his soul, and even his everything seemed to be separated from his true self. And in an instant, his body began to move beyond his control. As soon as he moved, he found that the magic power in his body was instantly suppressed. A brand new, more powerful, and more terrifying power that could even completely crush his magic power and wipe out everything about him appeared in his body out of thin air. It rapidly changed his body deeply, allowing his body to instantly surpass the limit of a level 3 pseudo-sage and step into a level 4 pseudo-sage. Then it was a level 5 pseudo-sage, a level 6 pseudo-sage, a level 7 pseudo-sage. Soon, it reached the peak of a level 9 pseudo-sage. Then it far surpassed this peak and reached a height that Luo Fan could not even imagine. And Luo Fan's magic power, Daluo Dao fruit, and all his treasures, including his universe in the sleeve and everything else, were directly removed and placed in the same place as Luo Fan. Obviously, the other party did not care about these things at all and did not care about the treasures that Luo Fan valued at all. Everything that the other party did seem to have surpassed time. Although Luo Fan felt that a long time had passed, in reality, from the time he was captured to the time his power and body reached this incredible height that far surpassed the level 9 pseudo-sage realm, not even a moment had passed in the outside world. But in reality, from the time he was captured until his power and body reached this incredible height that far surpassed the level 9 pseudo-sage realm, not more than a moment had passed in the outside world. At this moment, the old man opposite him was even still immersed in the last sigh of the boy. One could imagine how fast this speed was. However, this old man was an extremely terrifying level 9 pseudo-sage after all. So he quickly reacted and sneered. So what if you obtain a body? I'm afraid it will take you a lot of effort to modify the body of an ant like this to be able to withstand your power. How is it of any help to you? You've always been immersed in your own world. I've taught you so much, but you've completely forgotten about it. Although this person is weak, he has something that you don't have, an advantage that almost all cultivators don't have. At this moment, the boy's figure had already disappeared, and the person who spoke had become Luo Fan. However, the words that came out of his mouth were still the same as what the boy had said. Even the tone and tone were the same, deliberately mystifying. The old man was not willing to believe it. What was Luo Fan's level? He had already probed him once before. With that kind of strength, he only needed to send out an unknown amount of his avatar to easily crush Luo Fan to death. How could Luo Fan have any profundities that he didn't have? How could Luo Fan have special abilities that other cultivators did not have? If he really had those, how could he still be so weak? Hatred, anger, and jealousy have clouded your mind. Even if I give you a trace of holy will, you won't be able to withstand it. Instead, you'll be swallowed by the trace of holy will. Come back to my seat, kneel down, and kiss the ground in front of me, and wait for me to bring you through the holy realm, said Luo Fan. Although Luo Fan's body and mind were currently occupied by someone, he could still clearly sense everything in the outside world in an extremely mysterious manner. He could sense every single word of the conversation between the old man and the Divine Lord. The old man did not know what the Divine Lord was talking about, but Luo Fan understood when he heard the old man say that he had some kind of advantage that the other person did not have. What he was talking about was definitely that flawless and unhindered state. It was the extremely mysterious state where all one's cultivation achievements were completely integrated into one's everything. At that moment, he understood why the battle between the old man and the Divine Lord was so fierce that billions of worlds had been destroyed, yet he and Inbaiwa were still alive and were not annihilated by the aftermath of their battle. It was obvious that the Divine Lord had intentionally or unintentionally protected him just for this moment. Looking back at the past, he understood it even more. Why was it that as soon as he stepped into that checkpoint, there were two supreme and powerful gazes that were focused on him from the highest point of the world? The root of all this was his understanding of the saint's profound mysteries. The flawless state. He understood it. Luo Fan felt an inexplicable sense of pride. There was also an indescribable sense of bitterness. He was naturally proud of the fact that he had even condensed the holy will and was resurrected a long time ago. He felt that his current state was an advantage. It was an advantage that could allow him to have a smoother journey on the path to becoming a saint. It meant that his current state was very likely to be on the right path to becoming a saint. What he felt bitter about was even simpler. It was because he was in such a state that he was able to enter the Divine Lord's eyes. If it wasn't for the Divine Lord's attention, he would have ended up the same way as he did for Baihua. He wouldn't have encountered any abnormalities at all. At most, he would have walked around the checkpoint, obtained some treasures, and left. How could he have encountered such a desperate situation? Shut up. How could the old man remain calm when he heard the divine Lord's words? Clearly, he had become so powerful. Clearly, it was his sneak attack that caused the other party to fail and die at the final juncture of becoming a saint. Clearly, he was about to destroy the other party's resurrection plan again. Yet, under such circumstances, the other party still lectured and judged him in such a lofty manner. How could such a feeling be described as aggrieved and irritated? After he roared, he raised his hand and grabbed at the divine Lord, who was Luo Fan's body. This claw contained all the profundities of the universe, and it could practically evolve into everything in the universe. All the profundities of the universe could create and destroy everything. Under this grasp, the entire space violently trembled. Every time it trembled, it would reform after being destroyed. Every time it trembled, it meant that the entire world had formed a cycle of life and death. At that moment, a shrill scream came from the mist where Luo Fan and Yin Baiwa were. Then, a powerful force exploded from that location. An illusory figure of a woman rushed out and suddenly drilled into the void. As it drilled into the void, the illusory figure constantly dissipated and shattered. In the end, 99% of it was left in the void. Only a trace of its essence escaped and left the void. This figure was none other than Yin Baihua's life source. From Luo Fan's disappearance to the old man's attack, only a few words had passed. Although Baihua's reaction was fast, how could she have reacted in time? When the old man made his move, she felt a terrifying destructive force that was more powerful than the countless battles she had fought before acting on her body. Compared to the previous attacks that only caused her body to explode and her soul to be injured, this attack was completely different. The current attack was truly destructive. The moment she was torn apart by the attack, an indescribable sense of despair surged in her heart. The shock wave attached to her soul like a shadow and continued to destroy it. Looking at the situation, it would only take a short while for her soul to be completely obliterated and she would truly fall into death. Although she did not know why there was such a difference, Baiwan knew that she could no longer resist the aftermath of the battle like before. As a result, she simply exploded all of her power, all of her treasures, and even her own soul, leaving only her mind attached to her life essence. She disregarded everything else and fiercely attacked the void, wanting to break through the void and escape from this area. Fortunately, at that time, although the entire world was shrouded in two auras, the two auras had entered a fierce battle. However, it was no longer in an absolute state of balance. One of the auras even became a little violent during the battle, revealing a slight flaw. Because 100 Flowers had discovered this slight opening, she had abandoned everything, her life essence, and even 99% of her spirit. Finally, at the last moment, she had made her way out of this void and escaped into the sky in an incomparably pitiful manner. Because Baiwa used such a cruel method and paid such a huge price to escape, the old man and the ultimate god were just like ants that escaped from their feet when they stepped on them. It was like an ant that escaped from his foot when he stepped on it. None of them cared about her at all. As for why 100 Blossoms felt that the destructive power of the aftermath of the battle was so different from the aftermath of the previous battle, the reason was very simple. Previously, 100 Blossoms felt that the aftermath of the battle wasn't that strong and only caused her body to explode. It caused her soul to suffer a huge impact. She only felt that kind of indescribable pain. It was because during the process, the ultimate god separated a trace of power to protect Luo Fan and also her. At that moment, the ultimate god's goal of obtaining Luo Fan's body had been achieved. In other words, the time to obtain Luo Fan's body had been reached, so naturally, there was no more power to protect Baiwa. The true power of the battle's aftermath was naturally released without reservation. It was only natural that there would be such a result. After Baiwa escaped from the void, she returned to the demon realm. At that moment, She only had a trace of life source left, and even her soul was severely injured. She could not even exert more than 100 millionth of her level 7 pseudo-divine power. This kind of power was much weaker than a peak sage to be, but she did not dare to stay in the void. She did not care that Luo Fan was still in the checkpoint, nor did she care that Yun was still in Luo Fan's heaven and earth sleeve. She fled in panic like a stray dog. She hid in her cave residence and no longer cared about the outside world, because Baiwa felt that she was extremely unlucky and suffered a huge loss this time. However, in the void, Luo Fan was extremely envious of Baiwa. Although Baiwa paid a huge price, she still managed to escape and was considered to be away from danger. However, Luo Fan was still being controlled to participate in a battle that he could not possibly come into contact with. Moreover, he did not know if his body and mind would have a chance to return, although the Divine Lord said that he borrowed his body and mind, who knew if he would return it. Moreover, even if he did return it, what would become of his body in the end? Would he be able to return to how he was? All of this was still unknown. Under these circumstances, it was easy to imagine just how envious he was of the 100 Blossoms Association, which had already escaped and was far away from danger. At that moment, Luo Fan's body and the old man were once again in battle. The level of this battle was far beyond the scope of Luo Fan's understanding. The means displayed by the two of them were unimaginably mysterious, but Luo Fan couldn't understand them at all. He didn't know why this move of theirs could create such a world, and why this move could cause such a strange destruction to the world. This kind of battle made him feel uncomfortable, but also excited. He was upset because he clearly knew what the result would be, but he just couldn't understand it. However, he was excited because occasionally a trace of simple profoundness would be revealed, making him feel as if he had been enlightened and broadened his horizons. He even faintly felt that his cultivation level was about to break through again. "Thou trust me." Just as Luo Fan was watching the battle with complicated emotions, the Divine Lord's voice rang in his mind. This voice made Luo Fan tremble uncontrollably, and he almost could not react. "Why do you say that, Senior? So what if I trust you? And so what if I don't?" Luo Fan sorted out his thoughts and asked carefully, "Trust me, and I'll give you great benefits. If you don't believe me, I'll give you great harm." Once these words entered his heart, what could Luo Fan, who could not resist at all, say? He could only say, "Of course I trust you, Senior. All right, since thou believest me, I will now bestow thee with the power of thy life force. Thou shalt find my traitorous disciple's body for me, destroy it, and I shall grant thee freedom," said the Divine Lord's voice. These words made Luo Fan startled again. What body? Is he not in his body yet? Of course. How can I not know this traitorous disciple style? Although he seems to be losing his mind due to anger, it's just an act. He already knows how powerful I am. Now that he dares to appear in front of me, it doesn't matter even if he loses a clone. His body must still be hiding somewhere, watching, said the Divine Lord. At this moment, Luo Fan could no longer tell what the truth was. At this moment, he was like a fish on the chopping block. He could only follow the Divine Lord's words and asked, "If this person's clone is so powerful, his body must be even more powerful. I'm so weak. Even if I find his body, I'm afraid I'll just be sending myself to his doorstep. Thou do not worry. If I ask thee to do it, I will naturally bestow thee with the power to do it. As long as thou agrees, it's fine. What do you think?" said the Divine Lord. Although Luo Fan was extremely unwilling in his heart, unless he would rather die at this time, he could only agree. Thus, he said, "Everything is up to Senior's command." Chapter 1344. As the Supreme Divinity said that, Luo Fan felt a strange, invisible force suddenly acting on his invisible life essence. It instantly rushed him to a mysterious place. Following that, terrifying power poured into him and instantly condensed into a body that was no different from his real body. As this body was formed, the terrifying power continued to pour into his body. In the blink of an eye, he had the power of a level 3 pseudo-sage. However, This power was just pure power. It was not the Dharma power that Luo Fan had spent endless effort and countless methods to condense. There was also no Daluo Dao fruit that controlled this Dharma power and gave birth to this Dharma power. Of course, although this had some impact on Luo Fan, it was not very big. At this moment, Luo Fan was already in the level 3 pseudo-sage realm. The restrictions of the cultivation technique were already very small to him. Even if there was some impact, it was only to his improvement. In terms of the strength that he could exert, the difference was not big. Therefore, although he did not have Dharma power now, but pure power, the strength that he could exert was not much different from when he was at his peak. It could also easily destroy the world, easily create a world. That force did not subside just like that. It continued to pour into Luo Fan's body. It did not care that Luo Fan's original cultivation realm was only a level 3 pseudo-sage. It continued to increase his strength and even turned a part of it into a spirit will, allowing his spirit will to increase as well. In this way, his own strength surpassed the limit of the level 3 pseudo-sage realm and entered the level 4 pseudo-sage realm. Then, the power surged again and soon entered the level 5 pseudo-sage realm, followed by the level 6 pseudo-sage realm, level 7 pseudo-sage realm, level 8 pseudo-sage realm, and level 9 pseudo-sage realm. In the end, it reached a point that even Luo Fan was extremely shocked. He even felt that the power in his body had become so strong that he could not control it. If he was not careful, he would feel like he was going to be crushed into powder by this power. This feeling was so strong. Luo Fan instantly knew that this was a sign that the power in his body had exceeded the limit that his spirit and willpower could bear. As for the power that could be truly controlled, no one would think that it was powerful. Just like an ordinary person, no matter how strong he was, it was very natural to him. He would only feel that others were weak, but he would never feel that he was strong. This was based on his own feelings. If he compared himself to others and felt that he was stronger, then that was another category. Under normal circumstances, Luo Fan's willpower was filled with such great power, and that was what awaited him. It would definitely explode as the power flowed, completely erasing him. But here, at this moment, he had no such worries. Although he felt that this power was beyond the limits of his control. But at the same time, there was another force supporting him, allowing him to control the boundless energy in his body like a machine. It was enough to shock him. It was the terrifying power of a level 9 pseudo-sage. Moreover, because this kind of control was brought by another force, it was integrated with his mind, so it was not much different from true control. There was not much difference in the corresponding reaction that he could make. However, it did not cause him to lose much control over the power because of the layer of separation. When all the changes subsided, Luo Fan then noticed his surroundings. This was a strange void, a void filled with dense fog. This void was boundlessly vast, and that dense fog was incomparably mysterious. Although Luo Fan had the ability to see through everything, in front of this dense fog, he still felt as if he had turned into a mortal. What his eyes could see was simply not more than a few meters in front of him. This is the source of many barriers that I have set up. That traitorous disciple must be hiding here. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to put his avatar into many barriers that I have set up. The Divine Lord's voice rang in Luo Fan's ears. Hearing this voice, Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly. He was still too weak. To a powerful existence like the Divine Lord, he was like a toy without any ability to resist. He could only do whatever the Divine Lord wanted him to do. After smiling bitterly, he said, "This place is so vast that it's easy to hide someone. I'm afraid it'll take a long time to find him. It's fine. I have the authority to control this source world with you. You'll be able to find that traitorous disciple in a few days." The Divine Lord's voice rang again. Following this voice, Luo Fan felt that he seemed to have some kind of extremely close connection with the surrounding world. It was as if everything in this world had been included in his senses, and it was as if the affinity of the whole world with him had increased by 1,000 times. It was a feeling that he only needed to use 1/10,000th of his previous strength to do what he needed to do before, which made him feel a little inexplicable. Obviously, this change happened because the Divine Lord had given him the authority to control this source world. Understanding this, Luo Fan knew that this authority was a convenience that the Divine Lord had given him, and a few days was the time limit that he had given himself. This was very obvious. "I'll be able to find him in a few days" meant that the Divine Lord thought that a few days was more than enough. If he did not find him in a few days, it meant that Luo Fan did not give it his all. It was hard to say what would happen then. After discovering the true meaning, Luo Fan said cautiously, "Don't worry, Senior. I'll try my best to find the person you're looking for within 10 days. As soon as possible." After these two words, there was no more sound. Luo Fan did not wait for long. He began to activate the authority that the Divine Lord had given him and carefully sensed the entire source world. This source world was an extremely mysterious and strange world. This world was even more mysterious than the primitive world. Its level was also at the level of a colossal world, but it was higher than any colossal world that Luo Fan had ever seen. Although it was not comparable to the real demon world, it was not far off. In this entire world, the four basic existences of time, space, matter, and energy were mixed together in a very strange way. It formed a world that was different from all the worlds that Luo Fan knew. There seemed to be no order, but there seemed to be some kind of order that exceeded the scope of Luo Fan's understanding. What a strange world. Even though Luo Fan was under the control of the Divine Lord, he could not help but exclaim, "In such a world, the four basic existences could undergo some kind of strange evolution at any time and place, and could turn into countless strange colossal worlds to decorate this world. The countless colossal worlds that were evolved would be destroyed. For this world, it was equivalent to the four basic existences that were extracted from it returning to this world. It would not affect the world itself at all. Apart from that, the great path of this world seemed to be connected to an even greater and more vast great path. It was as if it was being blocked by some invisible existence, preventing it from truly connecting with the great path. In a trance, Luo Fan had an epiphany. The great path that was indistinguishable from the great path of this world was the great path of the demon world. This is the Divine Lord's body. In a trance, Luo Fan really understood and could not help but show an inexplicable shock on his face. Connecting the great path of the demon world and the great path of the primordial world was obviously what happened after he obtained the primordial world. It was the way to become a sage that was comprehended from it. As long as a cultivator could connect the great path of the demon world with the great path of the demon world, he could use the power of the demon world to become indestructible, omniscient, and omniscient. An omnipotent, eternal sage. According to that method, combined with the appearance of the world in front of him and what Luo Fan had heard from the old man, the appearance of this world was actually very similar to the Divine Lord's appearance after all those experiences. In this way, he could boldly speculate that this world was transformed from the Divine Lord's body. If this speculation was true, then all the mysteries of this world would be a matter of course. So that's how it is. Luo Fan's eyes were in a trance. After lamenting for a while, Luo Fan turned his attention away again. He began to carefully investigate every inch of the void in this world, looking for any abnormalities in this world. If this was really transformed from the Divine Lord's body, then the old man must have hidden himself very well if he was hiding here. Otherwise, the Divine Lord would have found him long ago. Moreover, his hiding methods must be extremely strong against the Divine Lord's methods. Only then would he dare to hide in the Divine Lord's body and not be discovered by the Divine Lord. Since that was the case, if Luo Fan wanted to find his hiding place, he could only use his own method, his own magic power, and his own methods to explore. This might be the reason why the Divine Lord asked him to look for it. Compared to the Divine Lord and the old man, although Luo Fan was weak, his methods were completely unfamiliar to them. The choices that he might make in certain situations were not something that the two of them could predict. Since the old man hid in the Divine Lord's body in a way that was completely against the Divine Lord, Luo Fan's method might not be very clever, but it was completely unfamiliar to them. It was very likely to be the way to break the stalemate. This kind of exploration process was obviously not something that could be completed in a short period of time. After exploring the entire boundless source world, Luo Fan naturally did not find any abnormalities. The senses from all the locations in this world were so normal that it made Luo Fan wonder if the Divine Lord had made a mistake in his prediction. Shaking his head, Luo Fan smiled bitterly and tried another method to explore. Just like that, in a short span of 3 days, he tried more than 3,000 of his own methods and explored the entire world again and again. However, what he gained in these 3 days was only to deepen his understanding of the source world. He even had a feeling that he might be able to replicate the source world in the outside world. As for what he was really looking for, the hiding place of the old man, he could not find it at all. This fact made Luo Fan exclaim in admiration, but at the same time, he felt slightly discouraged. Where is he hiding? Luo Fan frowned. If this was an ordinary world, he would have completely destroyed the world to force out the existence hidden here. With the power he had now, it was as easy as eating and drinking to do so. However, this was obviously not an ordinary world. This was the source world of the barriers, and it was very likely to be the body of the Divine Lord. If Luo Fan really did that, that would be simply asking for death. Perhaps before he could do anything, the Divine Lord would come over and slap him to death. I can't find it at all. There are more than 3,000 ways. Is there anything I haven't tried before? 3 days without any results had long made Luo Fan a little irritated. At this time, he was drifting aimlessly in the boundless source world. Everything around him was obscured by the gray mist. This fog was the product of the 4 basic existences mixed together. It contained many mysterious changes, profound and unpredictable, and even had the power to create everything. The power to create everything. After 3 days of exploration, Luo Fan had long been able to achieve preliminary control over this fog. If he wanted to, he could use his authority to create some level 9 pseudo-sanctuary existences in the fog. It would be like child's play. As he was irritated, Luo Fan slapped his hand forward. In an instant, the fog transformed into millions of figures that looked exactly like Luo Fan. They flew in all directions and replaced Luo Fan, almost covering the entire source world. In fact, it was completely meaningless. Each of these figures appeared because Luo Fan had used his authority to create them using the source world's power. They looked like Luo Fan, but in fact, they were just illusory projections. Their exploration of the source world. Actually, it was just Luo Fan's authority over the origin world that allowed him to investigate it. Compared to the more than 3,000 methods of exploration he used in the past 3 days, there was not much of a qualitative improvement, and there was not much difference. After exploring for more than an hour, the millions of Luo Fan still did not find anything. Luo Fan sighed and was about to disperse them. At this moment, his expression changed slightly. This was because he suddenly realized that among the countless figures, there seemed to be a subtle change in Luo Fan. This subtle change made Luo Fan, who was originally under his absolute control, seem to have been created by another existence. It's been replaced. Luo Fan was shocked and then overjoyed. He began to use his consciousness to descend on the doppelganger projection, thoroughly investigating the doppelganger projection, inside and out, up and down, leaving nothing out. What's going on? There doesn't seem to be any abnormalities. After investigating dozens of times, Luo Fan could not help but feel annoyed. This doppelganger projection was completely created by him, and there did not seem to be any abnormalities at all. The special change he had sensed before seemed to be an illusion, and he could not find any evidence to support that feeling. How could this not make Luo Fan, who felt that he had found a breakthrough, feel puzzled and annoyed? At this moment, a strange suction suddenly appeared from within the doppelganger projection of Luo Fan. It sucked at Luo Fan's mind and brought him to a strange place. This was a boundless void. In this void, there was nothing but a vast continent hanging high under his feet. On the other hand, the continent beneath his feet was like a real world. There were many natural sceneries like mountains, rivers, plains, hills, forests, grasslands, deserts, rivers, lakes, and oceans. Apart from that, there were also countless living beings living on it, and countless powerful cultivators were born on it. Why don't you come down and have a seat? At this time, a voice that Luo Fan was very familiar with sounded in his ears. That voice was the voice of the old man who was fighting with the ultimate god. Following the voice, Luo Fan felt his body falling, and in the blink of an eye, he went into a cave on a mountain on the continent below. There, an old man whom Luo Fan was quite familiar with was smiling and sitting cross-legged, looking at him. "I see. I didn't expect that. I've always been a pawn to you." Luo Fan could not help but sigh when he saw this. There was nothing more to say at this time. It was obvious that the old man had long expected and noticed that the ultimate god had asked Luo Fan to come to the source world to look for the old man. The reason why he did not care about Luo Fan for the past 3 days was because the timing was not right. Now that he had brought Luo Fan here, he obviously felt that the timing was right. It was even more likely that he wanted to use some tricks on Luo Fan to deal with the ultimate god. It was because of this that Luo Fan said such a thing. "If you're not strong enough, you're our pawn. You're weak now, so you're our pawn. When you're strong enough, we'll be your pawns." What's so strange about that? The old man laughed. Obviously, he completely understood what Luo Fan meant. The old man said it so bluntly that Luo Fan could only smile bitterly. He said helplessly, "What orders do you have for me, senior? There's no hurry. It's not the right time yet. You can be my guest here for now. There are many products in my world that can't be found in the outside world. Come and have a look first." The old man laughed. Chapter 1345. An arm was no match for a thigh. In the end, Luo Fan still tasted the various products that the old man had taken out. There were really some mysterious products that were produced. Among them, there were even many that he was tempted by, and he wanted to try making them himself. Moreover, because there were so many items, the time taken to appraise them was much longer than Luo Fan had imagined. Only after he had entered this place for nearly 7 days did the old man stop taking out the items. "What instructions do you have for me, senior? The deadline set by the Supreme Divinity is up. If there is no result," Luo Fan asked carefully. Although the Supreme Divinity did not specify how long he would be given, he had only said that he would be given a few days. A few days, this was not a definite number, but there was a maximum, and that was 9 days. If it was more than 10 days, it would not be a few days, but more than 10 days. Therefore, it could be said that today, which was also the 10th day since he had entered the source world, was the deadline set by the Supreme Divinity. If he did not give the Supreme Divinity the results by today, he might not be able to bear to face the consequences. Obviously, the reason why the old man kept him here was because there was something he wanted him to do. It was impossible for him to come here to taste some specialties. As such, he naturally couldn't just watch Luo Fan die. It was precisely because of this consideration that Luo Fan didn't say much just now. He just explained his experience clearly. "Today is the day," the old man said with a smile. "Senior, please instruct me." At this time, what else could Luo Fan say? He could only say this. "Although I don't know what special characteristics you have that the old man would value you so much, he has his eyes on your body. This is your opportunity, and mine too. I believe that when he told you before, he must have said that he wanted to borrow your body or spirit, right?" The old man said with a smile. This made Luo Fan's heart skip a beat. The old man's speculation was as though he had seen it with his own eyes. This made him feel even more ominous. The old man looked at Luo Fan's expression. Knowing that he had guessed correctly, he laughed and said, "Haha, just as I expected. After so many years, that old fellow hasn't changed at all. His methods of deceiving people are still the same as before." Luo Fan heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He had already figured it out, the words of the man in front of him, but it wasn't necessarily true. He could guess what the Divine Lord said to him. Perhaps the Divine Lord had always been deceiving people like this, and he had guessed it right away. Perhaps there was another possibility. The Divine Lord did not lie to him, but he guessed that the Divine Lord did not lie to him. Therefore, he twisted the truth and used the method of mixing truth and falsehood to mislead him into thinking that the Divine Lord was lying to him. This situation was similar to what Luo Fan had guessed before. He originally suspected that the Divine Lord would not return his body and soul to him. But at the same time, he did not rule out the possibility that the Divine Lord would keep his word and really return his body and soul to him. From this point of view, what the old man said was obviously just nonsense. There was no positive meaning at all. This was what made him heave a sigh of relief. However, although he did not completely believe what the old man said, Luo Fan naturally knew what to say. What should I do? Since both sides treated him as a chess piece, he would be a good chess piece. As for what the two sides were planning and who would win in the end, it all depended on their wits. As for him, he only needed to do what the two of them told him to, and see if there was a chance for him to get his body and soul back. Of course, the hope of success for his goal was extremely slim. However, at that moment, he was like an ant in the gap between two terrifying powerhouses. What else could he do? It's very simple. I want you to get your body and your soul back. The old man's eyes were shining brightly. I can't ask for more. However, my strength is limited. There's really nothing I can do. Luo Fan's eyes lit up and then dimmed. Although his expression was partly acting, there was a lot of sincerity in it. After all, this was his ultimate goal. It's good that you have this intention. The body and soul are originally yours, so you naturally have a natural affinity with them. With my help, the possibility of success is quite high. The old man smiled. Senior, please help me, Luo Fan said knowingly. The old man nodded and said, Come closer. When Luo Fan heard this, he knew that the old man was probably going to teach him some amazing technique. He could not help but be very curious. The higher the cultivation level of a cultivator, the less restrictions there were on supernatural powers and techniques. At the pseudo-saint level, every movement of a cultivator could be regarded as a supreme scripture by ordinary cultivators. At this level, what kind of magical technique could make a level 9 pseudo-saint pay so much attention to it? Even in the world that he created, he was so cautious and careful that he was even afraid of being heard by others. Of course, this thought did not stop him from coming closer to the old man's ear. The old man murmured in Luo Fan's ear and taught an extremely strange technique to Luo Fan. Luo Fan recalled this secret art. His face was a little blank and doubtful. He knew every word of this technique, but when they were put together, he realized that he could not understand this technique at all. It was as if there was a layer of strange fog covering this technique, making it impossible for him to understand the profoundness of this technique. For Luo Fan, who could casually create mysterious techniques, such a feeling was simply unimaginably strange. How could he not be confused? Forgive me for my ignorance, but this technique is too profound, and I don't understand it at all. Luo Fan did not care about his reputation at this time, and said this directly. In any case, he was definitely an ant-like existence in the eyes of the old man in front of him. Since that was the case, if he couldn't understand it, then he naturally couldn't understand it. He didn't need to care about his face and directly asked. When the old man heard this, there was no change in his expression at all. Obviously, he felt that it was reasonable for Luo Fan to ask this question. Therefore, he said, This technique is a mind-stealing technique that I specially created for you. Its power is very simple, which is to use the most powerful method to take back the soul that you have lost. Mind-stealing technique. Luo Fan heard these words. He could not help but feel his hair stand on end. According to the old man's explanation, this technique did not seem to be too special. The profoundness contained in it was only for him to take back his soul and body. However, just from this name, Luo Fan could feel a deep malice in it. Compared to the old man's explanation, Luo Fan believed that this technique might be a technique that the old man created to take his soul from the hands of the Divine Lord. If he used this technique, his soul might even be taken back by the old man. He was afraid that it would fall into the hands of the old man. He had witnessed the deep scheming of the old man and the divine lord. Luo Fan now had no expectations for the two of them. He was not afraid to speculate about the two of them with the greatest malice, of course. Obviously, he was a fish on the chopping block. With so many speculations, Luo Fan naturally could not reveal anything. Therefore, he could only say, "Senior, please explain. I don't even know how to cultivate this technique." The old man did not care. He chuckled and explained this simple technique that seemed to only have a few hundred words to Luo Fan's ear bit by bit. Following his analysis and explanation, Luo Fan discovered that this magic art that seemed to only have a few hundred words actually needed hundreds of thousands of words to explain it clearly if it were to be displayed. Moreover, even like this, it seemed that he had only explained a hair from 9 oxen, the tip of the iceberg. He could barely explain how to cultivate it. The mysteries hidden in the deeper parts were still hidden very deeply. As for the old man, obviously, he did not have the mood to continue explaining. He did not intend to explain the real truth to Luo Fan. He just chuckled and explained the cultivation method before stopping. He looked at Luo Fan with a face full of eagerness. Although Luo Fan's cultivation was only at the level 3 pseudo-sage, he had unimaginable knowledge after all. He had even seen many cultivation methods obtained from the great Tianyuan world, and he had even seen the real way of the sage. At the beginning, the hundreds of words of the technique were covered by the profound meaning of a level 9 pseudo-sage, so he could not find the truth behind it all. He could not understand this technique at all, nor could he understand the truth behind it at all. However, when this technique was broken down into hundreds of thousands of words, and the real cultivation method was directly revealed, his vast knowledge and unimaginably powerful comprehension ability instantly let him find some clues about this technique. In an instant, he grasped a trace of the mystery hidden in the deeper parts of this technique. That was the true mystery of this technique that the old man thought Luo Fan would not be able to discover. It really wants to seize my mind. After grasping a trace of the profound meaning, Luo Fan was so frightened that he almost could not control his body and began to tremble. Following the trace of the hidden mystery, Luo Fan found that this technique was indeed extremely profound and mysterious. It could even allow Luo Fan to fully activate the power of a level 9 pseudo-sage, even though he was not a level 9 pseudo-sage. He could even exert a terrifying power that was far beyond that of an ordinary level 9 pseudo-sage. It allowed him to forcefully take back his soul from the ultimate God's hands with such power, and then take back his body with the help of the soul. However, the mind that was seized in this way would be branded with another kind of mark. This kind of mark was extremely obscure and subtle. If he did not think in this direction, he would not be able to discover it, even if he was 100 times stronger. This kind of obscure and subtle mark only had one effect, and that was to completely erase his current life essence. He wanted his spirit to become a masterless spirit, and his body to become a masterless body. He's even more ruthless than the Divine Lord. Luo Fan's mind was filled with thoughts. If he did not have strong control over his mind, he might have looked at the old man with hatred. Although the Divine Lord did not know if it was true or not, he was still willing to say the word borrow. Moreover, he did not completely erase Luo Fan's life essence at the moment. He was even willing to hypocritically imprison Luo Fan's soul essence. Even if his real purpose was to let Luo Fan help him, he still had some goodwill left. However, this old man was completely different. Although he was completely smiling on the surface, the malice in his heart was really overwhelming. The technique that he taught him sounded nice, but there was such a sinister intention hidden in it. After grasping the truth of this technique, Luo Fan naturally was not in the mood to talk too much with this old man. He just said, "This technique is really too profound. I need some time to cultivate it. I wonder if Senior can distort time for me so that I can properly cultivate this technique?" No. What you are here now is only your life essence. Your mind and body are still in the old man's control. If I distort time for you, Because of the connection between the mind and the life essence, the old man will naturally find out the abnormality. When that time comes, he will be prepared, and you want to take back your mind, the success rate will be more than 10 times smaller. Moreover, I've already explained it very clearly. Just cultivate according to what I said. Naturally, you will succeed. You don't need to waste too much time to understand it. The old man smiled. Only then did Luo Fan understand why the old man did not teach him this profound technique for 6 to 7 days. Instead, he talked about all sorts of things for so many days. It was only until today, when the deadline set by the Divine Lord had arrived, that this profound and unpredictable technique was passed on to him. This was obviously not willing to give him too much time to study this technique. He was worried that he would find out the truth of this technique because of studying this technique for a long time. It's really interlinked and well-planned. Luo Fan secretly gritted his teeth, but he said, "If that's the case, I understand. Then I'll go now." "All right. When you go out later, go to this location. I've already set up many things there. You killed the living beings there, so you probably won't be able to fool that old man. Take it to report. It should be no problem." The old man laughed and pointed at Luo Fan. Luo Fan felt a wave of information flowing into his heart. The 4 basic existences of the source of time were mixed together in an extremely strange way. Naturally, it was impossible to use a fixed distance or a fixed description to describe the specific location. Therefore, even the old man could only use this kind of method that could only be understood and not spoken to pass this information to Luo Fan. Luo Fan sensed the information and nodded to show that he understood. The old man laughed and encouraged Luo Fan. He raised his hand, and with a wave, Luo Fan suddenly felt himself dispersing into thin air. When he condensed again, he was already in the source world that was shrouded in mist. At this time, many memories surged into his mind. He quickly discovered that when he was summoned by the old man to the world the old man had created, the clones he had created with the power of the source world did not disappear. Instead, they were constantly using various methods to continue searching for the old man's existence in the source world. His appearance was exactly the same as him, continuing to search in this place. Anyone who saw the actions of these figures would probably think that Luo Fan had not given up and was using the clones to search for something. They would not realize that the one controlling these clones was no longer the original Luo Fan, but someone else. Even this was calculated. Luo Fan sighed helplessly. At this time, he discovered that one of his clones was exactly at the location where the old man had previously passed the information to him. Moreover, the detection method used by that avatar just so happened to be a method that could trigger a strange change in that location. In other words, even if the old man did not pass the location to Luo Fan would only need to return to the source world to instantly discover the existence of that location. This whole process was really very natural. There was nothing strange at all. It was completely the same as when Luo Fan discovered that location with the help of these doppelgangers. Upon realizing this, Luo Fan could not help but sigh again. This plan was really sophisticated. He wanted to take advantage of the situation to reveal some flaws to the ultimate god, but he could not do it. He could only follow the path that the old man had laid out and follow the old man's arrangements. Sure enough, at this moment, a strange fluctuation suddenly flashed at the location where the clone was. The clone was instantly erased, and all traces of its existence disappeared without a trace. Sighing, Luo Fan eliminated all of his doppelgangers, took a step forward, and appeared at the location where the strange fluctuation had flashed. He then raised his hand and fiercely pressed down on that location. The source world's authority instantly condensed a terrifying power and rushed to that location. In an instant, that location changed abruptly, and a vast and boundless colossal world appeared there. Following that, a terrifying power rushed out from that colossal world. Luo Fan glanced over and found that the owner of that power was an old man. It was an old man who had been with Luo Fan for a few days and had just parted ways with him not too long ago. The strength and quality of the force that was attacking Luo Fan had reached the level of a level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator. It was so terrifying that Luo Fan instantly eliminated all other distracting thoughts and focused all his energy on dealing with that terrifying power. Chapter 1346. Isn't level 9 pseudo-sage the strongest realm below the sage? How can these people create a level 9 pseudo-sage existence as easily as drinking water? Luo Fan could only shout helplessly in his heart at this time. In the face of this existence, which was obviously released by the old man for Luo Fan to report, he could only wholeheartedly entangle with it and use all his means to fight it. Otherwise, if he was not careful, he would fall into an irrecoverable situation like fighting a real level 9 pseudo-sage. Finally found it. What a coincidence, it's exactly 10 days. At this time, a voice rang in Luo Fan's ears. This voice was the voice of the Divine Lord. After hearing this voice, Luo Fan felt a mysterious understanding pouring into his body through an extremely mysterious method. With this understanding, he suddenly felt that the world in front of him had completely changed. The world that was originally a misty world seemed to have many traces that could be used to find its pattern. In the world in front of him, there were also many traces of the various magic skills and various means that the old man had used. With a slight jolt in his heart, the magic skills that were originally completely incomprehensible and could only be resisted by relying on the authority of this world and the power of a level 9 pseudo-sage had been revealed in front of him. Oof. How dare a small ant like you get involved? You're courting death. At this time, the old man below shouted softly. This shout contained terrifying power that shook the void and shook Luo Fan, who was in the void. Luo Fan felt as if his entire body was about to be shaken into pieces. Even the power of a level 9 pseudo-sage that he possessed was about to get out of his control. He completely lost the feeling. However, at this moment, the understanding that he had just obtained played an important role. With that understanding, with a jolt in his heart, all the abnormalities disappeared completely. He even had the strength to turn around. He shouted, "Die!" This voice also contained unbelievable power. In an instant, it caused the vast world below to collapse, turning it into nothingness. Only the old man was left standing there, staring at Luo Fan in disbelief. It was as if he had even forgotten to attack. Luo Fan seized the opportunity. He raised his hand and slapped the old man. The power contained within the palm was enough to destroy tens of thousands of worlds. After the slap, in front of him, billions of worlds evolved, were born, were destroyed, and then appeared again. In the end, all the forces intertwined and mixed together, forming an absolute destruction. Luo Fan had seen this kind of destruction many times before. He had even used it before. However, he had never unleashed such pure, powerful, and terrifying destruction before. Amidst the destruction, he even felt as if he was facing a saint. He could kill the old man with one slap. Even if the entire earth was in front of him, he could use this slap to completely destroy it. Luo Fan was still rational, so he naturally knew that this feeling was just an illusion. Although he could now unleash such a terrifying attack and such shocking destruction, his own cultivation had not reached this level yet. Therefore, this destruction and terror could not be controlled as freely as he could control his own power. This power was like a giant hammer in the hands of an ordinary person. When holding a giant hammer, an ordinary person would also feel as if they could smash anyone to death. By the same logic, Luo Fan was like an ordinary person holding a giant hammer at this moment, feeling as if his destruction could destroy everything. The old man reacted extremely quickly. At this moment, he also raised his hand and blasted it at Luo Fan. The power contained in this attack was an absolute counterattack. Although the power of this counterattack did not completely suppress the destruction that Luo Fan had unleashed, it was enough to withstand this wave of destruction. In an instant, the vast and boundless source world that was covered by the fog, the vast world that Luo Fan suspected to be the body of the Divine Lord, suddenly became extremely chaotic, as if a wooden stick had been poked into a calm water surface and stirred wildly. This was because the endless fog that was formed by the four basic existences of time, space, matter, and energy mixed together, creating hundreds of millions of strange and bizarre forms during the stirring. Hundreds of millions of mysterious worlds evolved like bubbles, forming a huge vortex with the point where Luo Fan and the old man's attacks collided as the center and spread out to the entire world. In the blink of an eye, the entire world had undergone a huge change and became like a cluster of worlds. After all, the destruction that Luo Fan had unleashed could not be truly done as he pleased. Therefore, although it was stronger than the old man's counterattack, it could not suppress the counterattack. Instead, the impact of the counterattack caused Luo Fan's blood to boil, and he felt as if he could not control himself. At this moment, Luo Fan did not hesitate and changed his technique, turning his palm into a claw and directly grabbing at the old man. This claw seemed to be able to grab everything. It seemed as if all the power of the countless worlds in front of it had been grabbed and condensed on the claw. Then, under Luo Fan's control, it was sent flying towards the old man. The old man also changed his technique and threw a punch. A terrifying impact wrapped in the power of hundreds of millions of worlds shattered Luo Fan's claw, causing it to return in vain. Seeing this, Luo Fan's heart moved. With the help of his authority over this world, he instantly changed the world. Billions of layers of worlds appeared out of thin air, instantly wrapping the old man in the deepest part of these billions of layers of worlds. This source world was originally the source of the countless barriers. The countless barriers could even completely seal the power of a level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator. This clearly meant that this source world could create a world that could imprison level 9 pseudo-sage cultivators. Come out. Now that Luo Fan had control over the majority of this world, he could naturally create a world that could imprison level 9 pseudo-sage cultivators. Right now, these hundreds of millions of worlds were all like this. That old man was not an ordinary level 9 false saint. It was naturally impossible for a world to completely seal his cultivation and suppress his power. However, the power of billions of worlds stacked together. However, the power of hundreds of millions of worlds stacked together was not as simple as 1 plus 1. In an instant, all the power of the old man was completely sealed. In an instant, the old man turned from a powerful level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator to an extremely ordinary person. In fact, he appeared even weaker and more fragile than an ordinary person. However, even so, Luo Fan did not have a way to kill the old man immediately. This was because although the hundreds of millions of worlds had sealed the old man's power and cultivation, it was also a form of protection for the old man. If Luo Fan wanted to kill the old man, he had to enter that world. Once he entered that world, even if he had control over the majority of this world, he would still be suppressed. Furthermore, the degree of suppression would not be any lesser than what the old man had suffered. Fairness was the fundamental reason why the suppression was so powerful. Without this fairness, even if the suppression was strong enough to instantly crush a level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator to death, it would not pose any threat to a true level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator. This was because without fairness, it meant that there was bias. This meant that there was an existence that was not suppressed, or at least less suppressed. For a level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator, it was extremely easy to take advantage of this flaw and change their body so that they would not be suppressed. In other words, in order to suppress a true level 9 pseudo-sage cultivator, this kind of suppression power must suppress all existences. There must be no exceptions and no flaws. This essence made it so that even though the old man was suppressed in the depths of the billions of layers of worlds and was suppressed to a state where he was inferior to an ordinary person, Luo Fan couldn't find a way to completely destroy him in a short amount of time. He could only create some creatures that were at the limits of those worlds to besiege the old man, but he could not enter the world to kill him. You want to kill me just like that? Dream on. An ant will always be an ant. No matter how powerful your power is, you're just an ant. The old man shouted as he killed all kinds of creatures that appeared out of thin air in the depths of the hundreds of millions of worlds. Let's see. Luo Fan said this and no longer cared. He waved his hands and continued to create creatures to attack the old man in the depths of the hundreds of millions of worlds. The battle unknowingly came to a stalemate. Seeing that the battle was in a stalemate, Luo Fan's expression didn't change, and his movements didn't slow down in the slightest. He just kept repeating the previous process. Occasionally, he would change his method and create new creatures that were more specific to the old man to fight. Such a scene looked very normal. It seemed that Luo Fan was wholeheartedly engaged in the battle. However, that was only on the surface. In fact, at this time, Luo Fan's heart was surging with the technique that the old man had passed him. It was originally a few hundred words, but after a slight analysis, it turned into hundreds of thousands of words. For the previous Luo Fan, he could recognize every single word of this technique, but he had no idea what kind of technique it was when they were put together. However, for the current Luo Fan, he was qualified to understand its mystery because of the comprehension that the Divine Venerable had passed to him. The reason why the technique was so mysterious that Luo Fan could not understand, it was partly because it was difficult to understand, but more importantly, it was because the technique contained the profound mystery of a level 9 pseudo-sage. It was precisely because of this profundity that Luo Fan could not understand that it concealed the true profundity of the technique. This was why Luo Fan could understand every single word, but he could not. However, he could not understand the mystery of the technique at all. But now, the strange comprehension that the Divine Venerable had given to Luo Fan was a kind of comprehension that was close to the wisdom of a level 9 pseudo-sage. This kind of comprehension was the mystery of a level 9 pseudo-sage that he could not understand before. Although it was still profound in Luo Fan's eyes, it was no longer incomprehensible and impossible to break through. In other words, the current Luo Fan was already able to dispel the mystery of this technique and truly comprehend the profoundness of this technique. If this is the Divine Venerable's plan, such a thought occasionally flashed through Luo Fan's mind, but he quickly dispelled it with a bitter smile. No matter what, he had to understand the profundity of that magic art. He had to think of a way to improve that magic art, so that he could use the mystery of this technique to take back his soul and body. But he had to try his best to prevent his soul from being taken away by the old man because of this technique. After removing the fog, the technique that was originally composed of only hundreds of words began to expand rapidly in Luo Fan's eyes. The number of words began to increase by multiples of 10. In one moment of comprehension, it became a technique with thousands of words. Another moment of comprehension, it became tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, millions, tens of millions. After a few rounds, this incantation of a few hundred words had actually turned into hundreds of millions of words. But at this moment, it seemed that this was not the limit of this magic art. It seemed that the more he comprehended, the more words the technique could be divided into. The 9th step is indeed the realm closest to a sage. Luo Fan could not help but sigh as he sensed the hundreds of millions of words in his heart. In a few moments of comprehension, only a few dozen breaths had passed. At this time, the old man was still defending against the attacks of many living beings in the depths of the billions of layers of worlds. The Divine Venerable was still fighting with the old man's clone in the outside world, while the old man's real body was hidden in a strange world somewhere in the source world. No one could have imagined that such a huge change was happening in Luo Fan's heart. At this time, Luo Fan was multitasking. His movements were not the slightest bit unnatural, without the slightest bit of hesitation. His battle with the old man was truly new. Between his movements, it vividly displayed the performance of a person with insufficient cultivation level controlling an existence with power that he should not have been able to control. After realizing that there were no abnormalities, Luo Fan began to put even more effort into comprehending that secret art. As he comprehended it, the number of characters in the incantation increased again. Billions, tens of billions. In the end, when there were more than 300 billion characters, the number of characters in the incantation finally reached its limit, and it could no longer increase. At this time, Luo Fan finally breathed a sigh of relief. After analyzing and expanding a technique of a few hundred words, it actually required more than 300 billion words to analyze it clearly. Although this was unimaginably profound, it was still insignificant compared to the way of the sage. He did not forget that he had read about the way of the sage in the past. It was endless, not to mention hundreds of billions, even trillions, trillions, billions, or even the limit of numbers could not be completely exhausted. Compared to that, the expansion of hundreds of words into more than 300 billion words was really insignificant. Luo Fan was originally a level 3 pseudo-sage and had the heart and mind of a level 3 pseudo-sage. At this time, he had also obtained the wisdom of a level 9 pseudo-sage. His ability to analyze and comprehend was really strong to the point that even he himself was shocked. Although there were more than 300 billion words, to him, with just a glance, he could see them clearly. Even the content and the mysteries contained in it could be seen clearly without missing anything. With one look, his expression changed drastically. This technique was, of course, mysterious enough, but it was many times more dangerous than what he had seen before. In addition to being able to leave a mark that belonged to the old man in Luo Fan's mind during the process of cultivation, it could even gradually distort his mind, distort the essence of his life, and make him unknowingly think that he was the old man's avatar, making him gradually lose his independence. Damn it! An indescribable murderous intent surged in Luo Fan's heart in an instant. If it snatched away his mind and body, although Luo Fan would be furious, he would still have some leeway. After all, his soul was gone, and his body was gone. For the current Luo Fan, it was not fatal. As long as his life essence still existed, he would be able to reform his mind and body after a long time. However, if even his life essence was changed, then he would really be doomed eternally. The effect could even be compared to being completely erased from all the world and all the traces of his existence in all time and space. After understanding that the old man had actually calculated his life essence, how could Luo Fan not feel angry and not have a murderous intent? Although the murderous intent in his heart was boiling, Luo Fan did not reveal even the slightest bit. Now, all his power was borrowed, and the Divine Lord and his disciple had been watching him. If anything strange happened to him, what awaited him would definitely be a tragic fate that he could not even bear to describe. He carefully analyzed the technique of more than 300 billion words and carefully extracted the parts that were disadvantageous to him. Bit by bit, he fine-tuned it and slowly changed its characteristics, finally forming an existence with a completely opposite effect. Of course, such a process was impossible for the original Luo Fan, but now he was doing it with ease. As long as he had a little idea, there would be a continuous flow of reasons that allowed him to easily achieve his goal and change those things that he wanted to change into the effect he wanted. Chapter 1347. Although the number of words was about the same as before, all of the words had undergone an earth-shattering change. The technique that originally existed in this technique, which could allow Luo Fan to regain his soul and body, was still there. However, the hidden danger of leaving a mark on him had already been removed by him. Luo Fan carefully studied the more than 300 billion words again and found that they were indeed as he had thought. Only then did he feel relieved. He had changed every single word in the 300 billion words, so he was very clear about the mysteries of each word. It was naturally not difficult for him to compress the technique formed by the 300 billion words. Very soon, the 300 billion words became 30 billion words, then 3 billion words, 300 million words, 30 million words, 3 million words, 300,000 words. In the end, such a vast magic art was compressed into a short magic art with 3,000 characters. This compression rate was naturally much worse than the old man who had compressed the 300 billion words into a few hundred words. However, it was already shocking and heaven-defying enough. This whole process wasted another half a day of Luo Fan's time. In other words, from the time he started to study that magic art to the time he created the modified magic art, a full day had passed. Although the circulation route was still a little complicated after being compressed to 3,000 words, it was no longer a problem for Luo Fan. At least, compared to the more than 300 billion characters, it was already many times easier. The speed at which he performed the technique was already barely enough to meet Luo Fan's requirements. After realizing this, Luo Fan no longer challenged himself and continued to compress the technique. Instead, he took a deep breath and began to slowly circulate the technique without caring about the old man's clone that was sealed by the billions of worlds. The technique was not as simple as the circulation of power according to a special path. It involved many more subtle and detailed changes. It even included many states of mind. In the end, it could finally take shape. Even for Luo Fan, it would not be easy for him to cultivate this magic art. Fortunately, this was a skill that he had modified. Even though it was his first time cultivating it and he was not very familiar with it, he still succeeded in the end. The moment he mastered this technique, he could feel the existence of his soul and body. In that instant, his perception connected to his mind. His body, of course, it was just a connection. If he wanted to take back his soul, he naturally couldn't act so carelessly. Instead, he needed to be extremely careful and look for an opportunity to do so. Only by grasping the right opportunity would there be a chance of success. Activating the technique to take back his body without any scruples would only alert the Divine Lord. Forget about taking back his soul. The Divine Lord might even find out what he did wrong and erase him. Sensing his soul and body, Luo Fan instantly discovered the intense battle between the Divine Lord and the old man's clone. If it was in the past, even if they saw this battle, they would not have believed it. He was also completely puzzled. He could not see the mystery or the reason behind it all. However, that was obviously not the case at this moment. At this moment, he could understand the many supernatural powers that were originally completely incomprehensible to him. They were the Divine Lord's techniques, the old man's techniques, and the subtle changes that occurred after the intertwining of the supernatural powers between the two turned into the fundamental mystery that slowly flowed through his heart. At this moment, Luo Fan suddenly became a little obsessed. How much mystery did a level 9 pseudo-sage existence contain with each move? It went without saying how much benefit these mysteries would bring to a level 3 pseudo-sage existence. One could imagine how Luo Fan felt to be able to see and even feel these mysteries with his own eyes. How could he not be addicted to it? Fortunately, Luo Fan's Taoist heart was complete, and he could distinguish the severity of the situation. Soon, he knew what he had to do. He hurriedly gathered his thoughts and carefully sensed everything. He carefully observed everything and tried his best to find the opportunity he wanted. Although the battle between the Divine Lord and his disciple had lasted for more than 10 days, neither of them could suppress the other. Although the Divine Lord's cultivation realm seemed to be much higher than the old man's, he had only recovered a little bit of his will. Compared to his true strength, the strength that he could exert was not even 1/10,000th of his true strength. With such strength, even if the Divine Lord's cultivation realm was higher, how could he easily suppress the old man? At the place where the two of them fought, the void had been completely shattered. However, it was condensed in one place by the aftermath of their fierce battle. It could not disperse or disappear at all. Instead, under the stimulation of the aftermath of the battle, it condensed again from time to time and turned into all kinds of strange space-time. However, in the next moment, it could not withstand the impact of the terrifying battle and shattered. Looking at their respective attacks, every move they made was enough to completely wipe out any ordinary level 9 pseudo-sage existence. The terrifying power contained even felt that if it directly exploded in the demon realm, It might even cause a drastic change in the entire demon realm. It might even directly create battlefield ruins in the demon realm that had not dissipated for hundreds of millions of years, or in other words, a place of no life. Both of them had reached an incredible level of mastery in the way they used their powers. Almost every bit of power could be used to attack the opponent with power that was hundreds of millions of times greater than that bit of power. Looking at the dazzling battle, Luo Fan almost became obsessed again and forgot what he should do. Fortunately, he bit his tongue at the last moment and pulled his mind back from the battle. However, the battle was too exciting and mysterious. Not long after, Luo Fan almost became obsessed again. He bit his tongue again to sober up for a while and almost lost himself again. In just a short period of 2 hours, Luo Fan had bitten his tongue hundreds of times. In the end, he even directly shattered his tongue with one bite. He needed to condense and regenerate it to recover. It was not that he was torturing himself, but if he did not do so, it would not be enough to stimulate him out of his obsession and make him remember what he wanted to do. A moment later, 2 hours later, Luo Fan came back from one of his indulgences, and suddenly his eyes lit up. At that moment, he found that the ultimate god was displaying a magical power that seemed extremely terrifying and could even completely turn any level 9 pseudo-sage into powder. He was pointing at the old man's clone. Luo Fan did not care about that little bit of power. What he cared about was that at that moment, the Divine Lord had poured all of his thoughts and willpower into that one finger. He controlled Luo Fan's mind and body, but there were traces of flaws that shouldn't have existed. Such a small flaw. For his opponent, it was insignificant, because his finger was enough to make any opponent that was pointed at, even if it was a level 9 pseudo-sage existence, would not be able to deal with it lightly. He would need to concentrate all his mind and spirit to face this move. Naturally, he completely ignored the flaw that the ultimate god revealed. As for the bystanders, the aftermath of the battle was enough to cover or defend against anyone's sneak attack and any action that wanted to take advantage of this flaw. Therefore, it could be said that this flaw could not be considered a real flaw. But at this moment, it was useless. The ultimate god used Luo Fan's body and mind to display such a trick, revealing such a flaw. Moreover, more importantly, Luo Fan was using a level 9 pseudo-sage skill to peek at his own mind and body. Under such circumstances, this flaw was obviously the flaw that Luo Fan had been waiting for a long time. In the cultivation world, Luo Fan's existence was absolutely decisive in his heart. Seeing this rare flaw, Luo Fan made a prompt decision. He shouted softly and pushed that skill to the limit. A terrifying suction suddenly acted on his mind that was being controlled by the ultimate god. Along with the appearance of this suction force, there was also a shocking repulsive force that seemed to appear out of thin air. It rushed into his mind and frantically rejected everything that did not belong to his mind. It was rejecting the ultimate god's will. The suction force was so terrifying that if it appeared in a normal world, the suction force alone would be enough to tear the entire world into nothingness. The repulsive force could even easily repel any level 9 pseudo-sage level existence. The moment Luo Fan madly urged the technique, his body, which was given to him by the Divine Lord, suddenly burst into pieces and transformed into the fundamental power that was crazily injected into the technique, madly strengthening the power of the technique. When the ultimate god gave Luo Fan this body, he also gave him the power of a level 9 pseudo-sage. He also gave him the authority to control the source world, allowing him to control most of the power in the source world at will. Now that his body had exploded, the replenishment of power obtained from the magic art was already unimaginably powerful. However, Luo Fan still refused to give up. He crazily plundered the power of the source world and rushed it into the skill crazily, making the power of the skill even stronger. The suction force and repulsive force acting on his mind were instantly strengthened. At that moment, the ultimate god was caught off guard and his will was suddenly pushed out. As the ultimate god's will was pushed out, Luo Fan's mind was instantly freed. In an instant, his entire body exploded. Then, it suddenly shrunk and was wrapped by his mind. It passed through some mysterious channel and directly arrived in the source world where fallen mortal realm was. With a turn, his physical body reformed and his mind returned, once again merging with his life essence. The moment his mind and body returned, Luo Fan felt the fulfillment and satisfaction that had disappeared for a long time return. He could not help but smile inexplicably. Ha ha ha! Die! At that moment, the old man's roar suddenly rang in Luo Fan's ears. This voice shook his entire body. The body that he had just reformed was almost about to collapse and disappear. Then, he felt the void tremble violently. The source world was raging, and the void was torn apart in an instant. The four basic existences that were originally mixed together in one place immediately dispersed. The four basic existences each evolved into countless worlds with a single basic existence, revolving around two figures in a frenzy. The two figures surrounded by these countless strange worlds were none other than the childlike ultimate god and the old man. At that moment, the old man slapped the ultimate god with his palm. Even though Luo Fan did not personally feel it, he could clearly see it. Endless destructive power was continuously pouring from the old man's palm into the body of the child, constantly destroying his body. Luo Fan glanced at it and made a prompt decision. He did not care about anything else. At that moment, he still controlled the terrifying power of a level 9 pseudo-sage and still had a small portion of the source world's authority. Although the power was rapidly weakening and the authority was gradually disappearing, it was still under his control. He took advantage of this opportunity. He used a method he had previously thought of. With the help of that extremely mysterious technique, he changed the nature of these powers. Then, he brazenly burrowed into the depths of the source world and frantically destroyed the void of the source world, destroying its foundation. Finally, he directly went above the source world. He opened up a hole that led to the demon world. Seeing the hole appear, Luo Fan was overjoyed. He quickly burrowed into the hole and quickly burrowed into the demon world. At that moment, a cold snort rang in his ear. Following that, a terrifying destructive power was born from nothingness and violently blasted toward him. Luo Fan was incomparably familiar with the aura emanating from this destructive power. It was the old man's aura. Obviously, the old man's real body had discovered Luo Fan's abnormality and was unwilling to let him go, even when he was busy fighting the ultimate god. He wanted to wipe him out along the way. I didn't expect you to be able to find a loophole. Fine, I'll give you this chance. We agreed to let you deal with this clone. As long as you defeat him, all grudges will be written off. Following that, a figure suddenly appeared in front of Luo Fan out of thin air and blocked his path to the demon world. Those words came out of the figure's mouth. That figure was obviously the clone or projection of the old man whom Luo Fan had previously fought in the source world. There were people blocking the way in front, and there was a terrifying force coming from behind. For Luo Fan, this situation was really bad to a certain extent. Hypocrite, Luo Fan shouted angrily. At that moment, he suddenly felt that his level 9 pseudo-saint power seemed to have increased a little, and his authority over the source world seemed to have suddenly returned to its peak state. This is the power and authority that the ultimate god has given me again. Luo Fan's thoughts turned quickly, and he suddenly understood. He could not help but smile bitterly. What's the point of doing all this? At that moment, how could he not understand that his actions might have been part of the ultimate god's plan? Even the current situation was arranged by the ultimate god and was under his control. Although his heart was filled with mixed feelings, Luo Fan did not delay for long. The most important thing now was to deal with the situation in front of him. He slapped his hand behind him, and a terrifying force was spat out. A terrifying impact was born. Under the impact of this force, his figure pounced forward at an even faster and fiercer pace towards the old man's clone. The old man in front of him sneered and said, "You've overestimated yourself." Then, He raised his hand and pointed a finger at Luo Fan. A mysterious and indescribable light rushed out from his hand. It was wrapped in a power that was enough to collapse the great path and rush straight at Luo Fan. As if it had transcended time, it directly poured into his divine body. It's over. The old man sighed at the same time. His finger contained supreme power that almost surpassed the level of a level 9 pseudo-sage. Any living being, even a level 9 pseudo-sage, would definitely collapse and turn into nothingness after being touched by this finger. Although the Luo Fan in front of him was strange and mysterious, and even had a special method to avoid his schemes and actually retrieved his soul and body, it was still impossible for him to come back to life after being touched by this finger. The old man was extremely confident about this. Therefore, he slowly retracted his finger and shook his head with a sigh. He lifted his foot and was about to leave. Just as he lifted his foot, a look of disbelief suddenly appeared on his face. This was because he suddenly saw Luo Fan, who should have completely turned into nothingness, suddenly punch his chest. On the surface, this punch looked like an extremely ordinary punch. If one did not have good eyesight, it might not even be as exquisite as the punches of martial arts experts. However, the effect of this punch was so earth-shattering that the level 9 pseudo-sage old man was struck by this punch starting from his chest and spreading upwards and downwards. In the blink of an eye, he turned into nothingness and was completely erased from his origin. How is this possible? How can you not be dead? A cry of surprise came from somewhere. This time, it was the old man's real body that spoke. Moreover, his position was no longer in the unknown, strange world, but in the source world. He appeared not far away from the clone and the ultimate God's will. At this moment, he was looking at Luo Fan with a look of disbelief. Chapter 1348. Just as he rushed out of the hole, a scream of disbelief came from within. Following that, the void changed, and the hole suddenly expanded to a point where it was boundless. The entire sea had completely merged with the source world within the hole, causing the source world to seem to have become a strange sight in the sea. This should be a new, lifeless place. Luo Fan watched the changes and could not help but smile bitterly. All his previous efforts had been for naught because of this small change. It was as if he had once again fallen into the source world and entered the battle between the Divine Lord and his disciple. Fortunately, his current position was quite far away from the center of the battle between the two of them. Moreover, the two of them did not seem to have any intention of caring about Luo Fan at this time. Therefore, at this moment, he had a rare opportunity to watch from the sidelines. With a single thought, he could feel that he still had a considerable amount of authority in the source world. He could even control the power of a level 9 pseudo-sage. That appearance was exactly the same as the power and authority that the level 9 pseudo-saint had given him when he was asked to do things for him back then. This situation made Luo Fan feel helpless, but also inexplicably puzzled. At this point, what else does the Supreme Divinity want me to do? Thou have finally appeared. A faint voice reverberated throughout the source world. Following this voice, the void changed, and a huge figure of a child was born from nothingness, overlooking the entire source world. To be more precise, it was overlooking the source world. It was the old man who had just left the mysterious world and was rushing towards the figure of the child that his doppelganger had shattered. The old man's expression changed when he heard the voice and saw the figure. How is this possible? You have only just awakened. How could you hide from my senses? The old man roared. His expression was so incredulous and unbelievable. It was so inconceivable and unbelievable. It was as if he had discovered that something that he thought was in his grasp had suddenly changed and become something that he had completely grasped in his hands. Everything thou hast learned was taught by me. How could I not know thy means? How could I not be on guard? That boy said. As he spoke, he extended his hand and grabbed at the old man. The old man let out a roar at this moment, and his body erupted with an intense light. These rays of light turned into countless sharp swords. It quickly charged towards the phantom of the boy. The power of that sharp sword. Each of them seemed to be a world of sharp swords, capable of turning any level 9 pseudo-sacred cultivator into dust. Just this move alone. From this, it could be seen just how powerful and terrifying this old man was. Thou hast always been like this. Thou hast great strength, but thou hast always held back. He had to wait until there was no way to dodge before he exploded. Acting in such a manner is not something that a cultivator of the Tao should do. The boy sighed. The hand that stretched out shook slightly, and the entire source world shook violently. The countless worlds of sharp swords formed by the countless rays of light suddenly collapsed and turned into nothingness. They were absorbed into the origin world and became a part of it. Then, the hand gently grasped the old man's hand. At this moment, the old man's original clone suddenly collapsed. All the power was absorbed by the source world. Then, the world that the old man's original body was in also exploded, and a power that was tens of thousands of times stronger than the explosion of the old man's clone surged out and entered the source world. Ha ha ha! The old man suddenly burst into laughter. Why art thou laughing? The boy asked calmly. I'm laughing at myself, and I'm laughing at you. The old man continued to laugh loudly. I see. Thou art laughable indeed. I'm also laughable. At this time, the boy said something that surprised Luo Fan quite a bit. He actually agreed with the old man's statement. What you find laughable is definitely different from what I'm laughing at. The old man's expression was somewhat arrogant. Thou and I have been master for trillions of years. Back then, when I was trying to break through to the sacred realm, I brought thee with me. Now that things have come to this, it is indeed laughable. The boy sighed. Don't be so hypocritical. Now that everything has been made clear, do you still intend to use such a trick to deceive me? Oh, I understand now. So, you're thinking of that ant? The old man seemed a little angry at first. As he spoke, he suddenly thought of something, and his expression became a little strange. Those words made Luo Fan, who was watching from afar, change his expression. Why did the topic turn to him again? The boy smiled faintly, and his figure gradually solidified. As he solidified, a small world appeared under his feet. That world was not considered big, although it was extremely high in quality and could even be compared to the demon realm. It was only tens of thousands of square meters. That world was a void. There was no sky, no earth, and no other matter. There was only a figure lying there quietly. That figure was none other than a little boy, the ultimate god's appearance. Luo Fan glanced over and saw that world clearly. He also saw through the body in that world. There was a faint trace of eternity on that body, but at the same time, there was no sign of life within it. There was no vitality, and it felt like it was completely dead. This kind of inanimate object and eternal charm interweaved together, forming an extremely contradictory, yet extremely mysterious and inexplicable feeling. It made Luo Fan feel as if he could comprehend many things from it, but it also seemed as if he could not comprehend anything from it. Suddenly, Luo Fan's expression changed. This is the primordial world. He suddenly noticed that the world that the body was in gave him the same feeling as the demon realm. Even if there was such a huge and obvious difference between it and the demon realm, it was only on the surface. Everything in the entire world was exactly the same as the demon realm. The Great Way, the law layer, the world's origin, everything was exactly the same. At this moment, he was finally convinced that the feeling that the world was not worse than the demon realm was not an illusion at all. As a primordial world, such a world was originally the demon realm that had just been established. How could it be worse than the demon realm in essence? He actually changed the primordial world into this appearance and placed his body in it. Is this a choice made under desperation, or is it a necessary state to become a sage in the demon realm? Countless thoughts flashed through Luo Fan's mind in an instant. Although he had no interest in becoming a sage in the demon realm. However, that was an extremely high realm after all. After all, it represented some kind of imperfect, eternal indestructibility. He naturally had a strong curiosity about that realm, and naturally wanted to explore how to become a sage in the demon realm. While all kinds of thoughts flashed through Luo Fan's mind, Luo Fan's face was full of inexplicable shock. Inexplicable shock. Woo. I'm a little concerned about this cultivator named Luo Fan. However, it's not as you think. At this time, the boy had shrunk to the size of an ordinary person and said to the old man. The old man was still being held in the boy's hand. However, compared to before, he had shrunk by many times and was not even the size of the boy's finger, although the words were said to the old man. However, Luo Fan also heard the words. At this moment, all thoughts about the primordial world instantly disappeared, and all his attention was turned to the boy. At the same time, his mind was in turmoil, and he began to think about what the Divine Lord wanted to do. Compared to his own safety, the primordial world was a fart. When the two powerful level 9 pseudo-sages talked about him, how could Luo Fan dare to be distracted? Ha! The old man laughed out loud. You only say that in front of an ant. Back then, you behaved like an immortal in front of me. You were kind and loving, but what happened in the end? Didn't you want to turn me into a resource to become a sage? If it wasn't for my quick reaction and preemptive strike, I would have become a part of you by now. Now you're saying such disgusting things using such a disgusting cousin. It's so disgusting. 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 Everything I do for you is from the bottom of my heart. There's no doubt about that. The boy said faintly. As for wanting to turn you into a sage resource, it's true. However, that was just a plan I came up with at the last moment because I didn't have enough experience. In the end, I didn't even have time to carry it out. I don't deny that. Ha! You finally admitted it. You finally admitted it. Although you've said so many disgusting things, you finally admitted that you wanted to turn me into Saint Nourishment back then. The old man laughed heartily as an indescribable sense of relief flashed through his eyes. Luo Fan listened to their conversation and looked at the old man's expression. He could not help but sigh in his heart. The entanglement between the master and disciple was really too complicated. He believed that the boy was telling the truth. That was because he could understand such a feeling. The Divine Lord was really too strong, so strong that it made people feel hopeless. If he did not trust the old man completely, how could he be successfully attacked by the old man at the last moment of becoming a sage? In the end, he failed at the last moment. Although the old man's current strength was terrifyingly strong, he could not even win against the Divine Lord's awakened will. If the Divine Lord was prepared, the old man could still successfully attack him. Luo Fan did not believe that. Although he treated the old man well and sincerely treated the old man as a successor, it did not mean that he could not turn him into a sage resource at the last moment. Becoming a sage was the goal of all cultivators. It represented invincibility, immortality, omnipotence, omniscience, and omniscience. For a cultivator who was qualified to break through to the sage realm, it was a goal that they had worked hard for billions of years to achieve. Under such circumstances, if a cultivator who was trying to break through to the saint realm discovered at the last moment that his accumulation was still a little lacking, and he needed to convert his most cherished disciple into accumulation to assist him in successfully breaking through to the saint realm, it was obvious what choice he would make. Even if he would feel heartache and regret to the point of wanting to commit suicide after doing so, a normal cultivator would definitely do it. Therefore, when the Divine Lord said that he treated the old man well from the bottom of his heart and did not hide anything from him, Luo Fan absolutely believed it. As for the old man, Luo Fan had some doubts before, but now he understood. The old man. He was indeed interested in the divine will after the Divine Lord broke through to the sage realm and wanted to take it for himself. However, there was more pain in his heart. He felt that he had been deceived and schemed against. That was why at the last moment, when he sensed that the Divine Lord might attack him and turn him into a sage resource, he took advantage of the situation and sneaked an attack on the Divine Lord. That made all the efforts the Divine Lord had made to become a sage go up in smoke. But it was as if the Divine Lord was completely sincere to him. He was also sincere to the Divine Lord. Similarly, he regarded the Divine Lord as his most respected master and the guiding light of his life. After the sneak attack was successful, Perhaps it was because it was too successful. Or perhaps it was because of the stimulation from the memories of the past. He began to regret and began to doubt his feelings. He wondered if the feeling that the Divine Lord wanted to turn him into a sage resource was just an illusion. Such regret and such doubts naturally made him feel extremely uneasy, making it difficult for him to calm down. In order to calm his mind, he could only continue to hypnotize himself. He kept convincing himself that what he had done was not wrong, and that everything the Divine Lord had done was fake. He had deliberately planned to turn him into a holy resource at the very last moment of becoming a saint, because that was the only way. Only then would he be able to take revenge on the Divine Lord with peace of mind, and live with peace of mind. However, such doubts had already been born, so how could they disappear so easily? Such doubts still remained in the depths of his heart, making him feel uneasy all the time. It made it difficult for his cultivation realm to progress. It was also because of this doubt that he had been staying here, waiting and guarding the Divine Lord. Perhaps, on the surface, his intention was to kill the Divine Lord and seize the divine will condensed by the Divine Lord. However, it was more likely that he wanted to confirm his feelings from the Divine Lord. He wanted to know if it was just an illusion and if he had done something wrong. However, such an intention was hidden very deeply, so deep that he himself did not realize it. Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly as he speculated. Such countless trillions of years of entanglement really made people speechless. I admit it, the Divine Lord sighed and said. His eyes seemed to be a little distant, and he looked a little lost. Even Luo Fan could deduce so many things from the old man's eyes, let alone the Divine Lord, who was even more familiar with the old man. For a moment, countless images of him and the old man flashed in his mind, and he suddenly felt a little dispirited. In this matter, it was impossible to tell who was right and who was wrong. Perhaps the one who was really wrong was himself. If he had not brought the old man along to watch the process of him breaking through to the saint realm, perhaps all of this would not have happened. He would not have had the thought of turning his disciple into resources just because he was lacking that last bit of accumulation, and the old man would not have had ill intentions after seeing the holy will. If that had been the case, even if he had not become a saint, he would not have fallen to his current state, where he would need to spend trillions of years to recover a little bit of his will. It would even be a long time before he could truly resurrect himself. And the old man would not have fallen into that mental barrier because of this, and ended up in such a state where his bright future was destroyed. Everything is my fault. He naturally opened his mouth as he thought about it. The old man was also a person with extraordinary wisdom, and was more familiar with the Divine Lord than anyone could imagine. He had been pondering his thoughts and plans for trillions of years. How could he not know what the Divine Lord was thinking when he suddenly said such a thing? For a moment, he was a little stunned. Both of them fell into an inexplicable atmosphere. At this time, Luo Fan felt inexplicably helpless. Just tell me what plans you have. I'm hanging in the air like this. How am I supposed to settle down? As he thought about it, his expression became a little anxious. Of course, although he was anxious, he knew who was stronger and who was weaker. Naturally, he could not speak. Do you know that the reason why I failed to break through to the saint realm was not because of a lack of accumulation? If I had successfully turned you into a saint resource back then, I would not have had the chance to break through to the saint realm. Suddenly, the boy sighed. Whether it was Luo Fan or the old man, they were instantly shocked and focused all their attention on him. Becoming a saint was an eternal topic and goal for cultivators. Now, that a person who had broken through to the saint realm was explaining the path to becoming a saint, it was an irresistible temptation for all cultivators. The old man opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end, he did not speak. The Divine Lord did not wait for the old man to speak and said, Do you know that the world we were born in is not the only world with saints? Chapter 1349. When Luo Fan heard this, his facial expression did not change, but his heart was like the sea in a storm. It was really turbulent, and he could not control himself. He originally thought that he was the only one who could see this clearly, but he did not expect that there was someone else besides him who could. They knew that the Devil Realm saints were not real saints. The Divine Lord naturally did not care what Luo Fan thought. He continued, "Do you know how many saints there are in the world with saints?" He did not wait for the old man to answer, nor did he expect an answer from Luo Fan. He continued, 7. Only 7. The history of that world is tens of thousands of times longer than that of the Devil Realm. However, there are only 7 saints in such a long time. How is that possible? The old man finally lost his composure. Just from a number of saints, you can see that there must be a difference between the Devil Realm saints and the real saints. Although I knew about this difference, I wanted to be lucky. I really couldn't find a way to become a saint, so I tried to break through to the Devil Realm saint realm. The old man did not speak anymore. He only looked at the Divine Lord with a strange look, as if he was indifferent, but also as if he was extremely concerned about it. This was in line with his current state of mind. Devil Realm saints, the Divine Lord murmured. His face suddenly showed an inexplicable sarcasm. After a while, he continued, "The difference between the Devil World sages and the real sages is that the real sages are immortal and can't be worn down by thousands of tribulations. However, the Devil Realm saints can only be immortal and cannot be destroyed in the Devil Realm. In other words, the Devil Realm saints are borrowing the power of the Devil Realm. Borrowing the power of the Devil Realm. This means that the more Devil Realm saints there are, the less power they can borrow, which is equivalent to their cultivation level weakening." Luo Fan was shocked. All kinds of thoughts flashed through his mind. Finally, it turned into a kind of rejoicing. It was a kind of rejoicing that he did not choose to use the power of the primitive world to break through and become a Devil Realm saint. Those Devil Realm saints could be immortal and could not be destroyed by the power of the Devil Realm. In this way, the increase of the number of saints, it would harm them. It was fine when their numbers were small, but when their numbers increased to a certain extent, their strength would probably be reduced to a level where they couldn't even compare to a truly powerful level. 9 pseudo-saint. Of course, to reach this point, the number of sages in the demon realm might need to be in the billions or tens of billions to have such a huge impact. 54 sages would have an impact, but it would definitely not be too shocking. However, regardless of whether it was big or small, as long as such a trend of development could lead to such an outcome. For the sages of the demon realm who had eternal time, this was enough for them to cut off this possibility at the root. In other words, the sage of the demon world. It would definitely hinder those who were trying to break through to the saint realm. Even if this kind of obstacle could not be completely annihilated, it was enough to completely cut off the path of advancement for anyone who wanted to become a sage in the Devil Realm. Under such circumstances, any creature, any level 9 pseudo-sage who wanted to break through to the sage realm and become a sage of the demon realm would have to challenge 54 sages of the demon realm. He had to withstand the hindrance of 54 sages. This, even for a sage of the demon realm, it would not be an easy task. Not to mention for a level 9 pseudo-sage who was trying to break through to the sage realm. That was simply an impossible task. After understanding this, Luo Fan had a sudden realization as to why the Divine Lord said that he could not succeed in breaking through to the sage realm. The fundamental reason was not that his accumulation was insufficient. With 54 sages hindering him, even if his accumulation was increased by 10,000 times, 100,000 times, or even 1,000,000 times, it would still be impossible for him to succeed. What Luo Fan could think of, the old man could naturally think of too. For a moment, his face was deathly pale. Luo Fan had long decided not to take the path of the Demon Realm sage and did not cultivate according to the Demon Realm sage's method of becoming a sage. For the current outcome, he was naturally glad for his original choice and did not have too many other feelings. For this old man, the situation was different. This old man had already reached the 9th step below the sage realm and was only a small step away from becoming a sage. Almost if he had an impulse, he could break through to the sage realm just like the Divine Lord did in the past. With such a close distance to the sage realm, it naturally made him involuntarily have a kind of ambition to enter the sage realm. Naturally, it made him look forward to when he could achieve the sage realm. Under such circumstances, all of a sudden, the Divine Lord told him that the sage realm he thought he could touch was actually fake. The goal he had been pursuing for trillions of years turned out to be a wrong one. It was a goal that could not be achieved. That was simply pushing him into the abyss at the end of his success. One could imagine how much of a blow it was to him. Impossible. Things can't be like this. The old man struggled frantically and roared. A mocking smile appeared on the Divine Lord's face. He did not speak and just casually threw the old man away. Things can't be like this. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. The old man roared. The voice had an unparalleled penetrative power and contained unimaginable power. Under the impact of the voice, the source world was like still water being stirred by a wooden stick. It began to turn murky at an unimaginable speed, and the entire source world was rapidly approaching destruction. It seemed as if it would turn into nothingness at any moment. Luo Fan was in the source world and naturally withstood the terrifying impact of the voice. However, he still had the power of a level 9 pseudo-sage and also had the authority of the source world. This terrifying impact was like a breeze to him and did not cause him any harm. With just a thought, the impact directly bypassed his body as if he was in a forbidden zone for sound. The old man was now close to going crazy. There was no longer Luo Fan or the Divine Lord in his eyes. Even though he had regained his freedom, even though he no longer had any restrictions, even though the enemy he had hated for trillions of years was right in front of him, he no longer cared. There was no hatred, any kind of kindness, any kind of love, in the face of true immortality, in the face of the true indestructibility of all tribulations, was so insignificant. At that moment, the old man finally understood what he had been pursuing in his life. He also finally knew how much time he had wasted to hate for trillions of years. In his madness, the aura on his body rose wildly as a vast and boundless great path river rushed out of his body and directly broke through the restrictions of the void. It broke through the shackles of the laws and directly entered the void, above the great path hidden under the laws, and madly rushed towards the great path. He's trying to break through to the saint realm. Luo Fan was shocked when he saw that. The old man's behavior was obviously that he had not given up. He still wanted to break through to the saint realm. As for the method of breaking through to the saint realm, he had seen an ultimate god breaking through to the saint realm before and naturally knew it very well. The flowing pattern of the long river that rushed out from the old man's body contained endless changes and inconceivable truths. Although it was just a process of fusing with the old man, it contained all the mysteries of the great Tao of the demon realm and all the truths of the universe. The whole process seemed like another great path of the demon realm had reappeared and was about to merge with the great path of the demon realm. Looking at the process, Luo Fan's eyes flashed with countless insights. He had thought of turning the great path he had condensed into a great path that was exactly the same as the great path of the demon realm, but he had never really done it. That was because it was simply too difficult. Even if it was him, he felt that it was almost impossible to achieve this step. The great path of the demon realm was too complicated, too deep, and too mysterious. With his current comprehension ability, if he wanted to truly achieve this step and transform the great Tao that he had condensed into a form that was completely identical to the great Tao of the demon realm, it would take at least hundreds of trillions of years before there was even a trace of a possibility. Using this method to integrate my great path into the demon realm's great path is indeed a good choice. This way, I can avoid the incompatibility after the two are connected, and the possibility of becoming a demon realm sage is higher than other methods, Luo Fan thought to himself. At this moment, he had completely forgotten everything else. He was just trying his best to absorb the mysteries revealed by the old man's great Tao. He carefully comprehended the many truths revealed in it and used the wisdom of the level 9 pseudo-sage he now had to turn it into resources for his own progress. He worked hard to promote his cultivation realm. The ultimate god could only look at the scene with pity. The expression on his face was not one of mockery or expectation, but a kind of nostalgia, as if he had fallen into a deep memory. The great path, condensed by the old man, gradually overlapped with the great path of the demon realm. Looking at their postures, it was as if they were originally one, and now they were fused together again. As the two great paths gradually overlapped, the aura on the old man's body began to rise continuously. Gradually, there was a kind of eternal and inextinguishable charm. The old man's eyes gradually flashed with endless enlightenment. Wisps of light, of wisdom, and great path divine light constantly flickered between his eyes. These various changes seemed to be endless. In the blink of an eye, the old man's aura had increased by more than 10,000 times. It directly enveloped the entire source world and seemed to change the owner of the source world from the original ultimate gods to the old man's. Amidst such a change, Luo Fan was secretly shocked, and his body could not help but retreat. At this moment, a gentle and vast power enveloped him and completely isolated the old man's aura, preventing him from being affected by the aura's erosive influence. Even the terrifying impact of the source world was instantly pushed away from him. As soon as Luo Fan came into contact with this strange power, he instantly understood that it was the power of a divine lord. At this point, how could Luo Fan not understand that the one protecting him was the ultimate god? What is he trying to do? At this time, Luo Fan's heart was filled with doubts. The ultimate god still wanted to protect him at this time. What was he planning? What did he want to do to him? Don't think too much. I have no ill intentions towards you. At this time, the ultimate god suddenly smiled at him. This voice lightly drilled into his ears. It was like a cool breeze that soothed his soul, making him feel a lot more at ease as soon as this feeling appeared. Luo Fan was startled and forcibly expelled this feeling. He didn't want his mind to be affected by the sound. To him, his soul should be absolutely free unless he wanted it to be. Otherwise, he would do his best to avoid and expel anything that changed his soul, whether it was good or bad. The ultimate god could naturally see what Luo Fan was doing, but he only smiled and did not say anything else. He only looked at the old man who was breaking through to the saint realm. The old man's aura was getting stronger. That eternal and indestructible charm was also getting more and more obvious. In a trance, Luo Fan felt that the old man's essence had changed. It was as if he was no longer the same as him. It was as if the old man's life essence had become unimaginably stronger than his own. This is the holy will. Luo Fan's eyes lit up. He murmured, "Yes, this is the holy will. I didn't expect that after so many years, it has already progressed to this stage. It's 100 times stronger than I was back then." The ultimate god sighed and said. Luo Fan could not help but feel an indescribable desire in his heart. It was a desire for the holy will, a desire to go further. It was as if the holy will had become his only goal at this moment. It had become the ultimate existence that he had been cultivating for trillions of years. The moment such a desire was born, Luo Fan immediately reacted. He forced himself to calm down and cut off this strange desire that suddenly appeared in his heart. His eyes instantly became clear again. Not bad, not bad. You can actually resist the attraction of this life essence. I was right about you. At this time, the ultimate god's voice suddenly came into Luo Fan's ears. This shocked Luo Fan, and he instinctively asked, "What do you mean?" The holy will is an abstract existence that is produced when a life essence steps into eternal and indestructible. This kind of existence is a deep and instinctive pursuit for any living creature. Naturally, it will produce an extraordinary attraction for all living creatures. Even a level 9 pseudo-sage would feel the urge to take the holy will for themselves, and they might even take action against it. In the past, even my disciple could not resist this kind of temptation. From his point of view, you're already stronger than him. The ultimate god smiled and said. This shocked Luo Fan. He felt lucky and helpless at the same time. In fact, the ultimate god had overestimated him. The reason why he could react in an instant and cut off that desire was not because his mind was strong, nor was it because he could really see through that desire. Instead, it was because he had already been extremely vigilant. His heart was extremely vigilant against all factors that could change his mind. It was precisely because of this vigilance that he discovered the strangeness of the desire the instant it was born, and he decisively severed it. The reason why he was so vigilant was obviously because of the ultimate God. It was because the ultimate God had used his voice to change his mind once before. He was worried that the ultimate God would do it again, so he was so vigilant. In a sense, it was the ultimate God that made him behave like this. Of course, these words could not be said at this time. Luo Fan could only smile bitterly and said, "I was just lucky. There's no such thing as luck in this world. Everything has its reasons." The ultimate God smiled faintly. At this time, the old man who was breaking through to the saint realm suddenly roared, "No!" At the moment when he roared, Luo Fan realized that the great Tao he condensed seemed to be lacking in strength the moment it was about to merge with the demon realm's great Tao. No matter how it changed, it could not truly merge the great Tao with the demon realm's great Tao. No matter what, it was still lacking a little bit. In that instant, the old man had tried countless times and finally realized that it was impossible for him to break through that tiny bit of distance. He finally realized that it was impossible for him to break through that tiny bit of distance with his current strength. It was impossible for him to truly become a saint. If the ultimate God had said those words about the demon realm sages, he would only think that his accumulation was not enough and might even think of turning everyone present into his saint realm resources to push him to break through that little bit of distance. However, at this time, what the ultimate God had said before was like a nightmare that could not be swept away. He instantly understood that it was not that his accumulation was not enough. It was because the 54 sages from the demon realm had made their moves this little bit of distance. Not to mention now, even if he was 100 times, 1,000 times, or even 10,000 times stronger, he would still not be able to overcome it. Unless his strength could be strong enough to surpass the combined strength of the 54 sages from the demon realm. If he could do that, why would he need to become a demon realm sage? Chapter 1350. Just as the old man was in despair, anger, and madness, the great path of the demon realm shook slightly. The great path that the old man had condensed collapsed in an instant. The abstract existence that formed the great path instantly turned into countless fragments that scattered in all directions. Eventually, it gradually dissipated like fog. With this change, the old man's aura that was originally as strong as that of a sage suddenly began to weaken like a plunge. The eternal charm that could not be worn down by thousands of tribulations also began to fade rapidly during this process. It became weaker and weaker at an extremely fast speed, becoming more and more undetectable. In the end, when the mist formed from the great Tao that he had condensed completely dissipated, the charm brought by the divine decree had already disappeared, as if it had never appeared in the first place. "Do you believe me?" the divine Lord said at this time. These words were faint, but like thunder and lightning. It instantly woke the old man up from his despair. He turned his head and looked at the divine Lord with a face full of death. There was no trace of life in his eyes. "It turns out that the goal I've been pursuing all my life is just a bubble," he said with a voice without a trace of warmth. The divine Lord sighed. "It's indeed a bubble. I've experienced the same process in the past, so I understand it better than anyone else." The old man suddenly laughed without any warning. Even though he laughed like that, there was still no warmth in his voice. The despair in his voice was even more obvious and shocking. I see. He laughed as 2 lines of tears suddenly flowed from his eyes. Tears were a common occurrence for mortals. However, for cultivators, the higher their cultivation level, the harder it was to make them cry. Once they became immortals, even if they were only in the individual immortal realm, they were almost completely immune to tears. At this moment, this level 9 fake sage who was trying to break through to the sage realm. 2 lines of tears flowed from his eyes. This It was enough to show how huge the impact of what happened just now was to this level 9 fake sage in front of him. It also showed how desperate he was. "It's all fake. It's all fake," he said while crying. As he spoke, the power in his body began to gradually expand. An aura of extinction began to gradually spread from his body. Even Luo Fan could see that he was about to self-destruct. Everyone could tell that he was planning to self-destruct. "You've already condensed a trace of holy decree. Can't you see through it?" Suddenly, the Divine Lord interrupted. The old man's heart was already in extreme despair, thinking that his life's struggle was nothing but an illusion. All he had ever wanted in his life was to be fake, so he decided to destroy himself. He was stunned when he heard what the Divine Lord said. Although he had failed to break through to the Saint Realm just now, he still retained a trace of holy decree that he had condensed in that instant. To him, such a trace of holy decree was like a rock candy to a basin of water. Although it was insignificant, it was enough to change the nature of his life. Everything he saw now was completely different from before. Previously, his heart was shrouded in despair, and he did not understand this change. Now that he was reminded by the Divine Lord, he understood. He discovered that the world in his eyes was different. Along with his will, his body, which was expanding and emitting an aura of annihilation, slowly calmed down. Evidently, the self-destruction process had stopped. "What do you mean?" he asked with a frown. Although the world in his eyes had changed, he did not know what the Divine Lord was talking about. The Divine Lord smiled and pointed somewhere not far away. Luo Fan could not help but turn pale with fright. The Divine Lord's finger was not pointing anywhere else, but directly at his body. The old man looked at the direction the Divine Lord was pointing at, and his eyes were filled with doubt. Then, the doubt in his eyes gradually dissipated. The despair that could not be dispelled suddenly disappeared, and was replaced by a kind of hope. "Seniors, may I know what's wrong with my body?" Under the gaze of the two people, Luo Fan finally could not help but ask. I see. No wonder you care so much about this person." The old man laughed after a while. "It seems that you've seen the key." The Divine Lord also smiled. Between the two of them, neither of them cared about what Luo Fan asked, nor did they answer him. Faced with such a situation, Luo Fan's heart was filled with helplessness. However, facing two people who had already condensed a trace of holy decree, all he could do was to remain silent. I can see it. So this is where the hope lies." The old man laughed. The Divine Lord also nodded and smiled. The way he looked at Luo Fan became even more gentle, as if he was looking at a peerless treasure. The way the old man looked at Luo Fan was also very different from before. It was also changing toward the same response. After a while, the two of them looked at each other and smiled. Then the Divine Lord raised his hand, and the entire source world instantly changed. All the chaos caused by the previous battle instantly calmed down. Even the four basic existences of time, space, matter, and energy, which were originally a mess, had completely restored some sort of order and formed a boundless starry sky. Under the calm surrounding, the Divine Lord and the old man stepped toward Luo Fan at the same time. Looking at their tacit understanding, it was impossible to imagine that they were so hostile toward each other not long ago, or that they both wanted the other to die immediately and their souls to scatter. Luo Fan was completely confused. Faced with the two of them, he was naturally shocked, and his body almost could not control itself and wanted to step back. Fortunately, he still had some sense left. He knew that this was not a problem that could be solved by stepping back, so he forcibly stopped his movement. "Are you curious why I treat you so differently?" the Divine Lord asked. Yes. Although Luo Fan had some guesses at the beginning, he was still more confused. At this time, he naturally did not hesitate to say so. The Divine Lord only smiled and said, "You are flawless and your body is perfect. You already have the embryonic form of the holy decree. In the future, you will be better than us. You will have a greater chance of becoming a saint. Even more so, the saint that you become. Not the saint from a devil kingdom that is limited by prefixes, but a true saint. Me, the embryonic form of the holy decree. When Luo Fan heard this, he could not help but be stunned. What kind of existence was the holy decree? After witnessing the process of the old man breaking through to the saint state, he could not be more clear about it. It was a supreme existence that could almost make people become a saint. It was eternal and indestructible. Such an existence could even make people disappear upon death. After the soul was scattered, it could still come back after such a long time. One could imagine how unbelievable it was. Under such circumstances, he suddenly heard that he actually had the embryonic form of such a supreme existence. One could well imagine how unbelievable and inconceivable that feeling was. How could he not be stunned? That's right, from you. You have the embryonic form of the holy decree. This embryonic form, if you continue to develop, once you step on the 9th step, it will truly take shape. By then, you don't even need to break through to the saint state. You will be able to reach our current state. If you continue to improve, it is not impossible to bypass the devil kingdom and become a saint. The old man interrupted at this time. This is really unbelievable. I don't really believe it. Luo Fan said carefully. Whether you believe it or not, I can't prove it to you. The existence of the holy decree is an extreme existence that surpasses all language and words. With our cultivation base, it is impossible for us to manifest it for you to carefully understand. However, do you think it is necessary for us to lie to you? The Divine Lord smiled. When Luo Fan heard this, he had to admit that the Divine Lord's words made sense. The Divine Lord and the others indeed had no reason to lie to him. To him, the two of them were absolutely powerful existences. In front of the two of them, he was simply as weak as an ant. Whatever they wanted to do, there was no possibility for him to resist. Under such circumstances, why would the two of them lie to him? Of course, it is impossible for the two of you to lie to me. I just don't know why the two of you are telling me this now. Luo Fan said. Of course it is to become a saint. The old man smiled at this time. The two of you are a bit too much. Luo Fan laughed at himself. That's right. The reason we keep you here is to have the last chance to become a saint. The Divine Lord affirmed the old man's words and said. Luo Fan listened and could not help but be curious. If it was the old man who said it, he might have been teasing him. However, since the Divine Lord and the old man said at the same time, he could not help but believe that the two of them might really be thinking that way. Under such circumstances, he could not help but secretly think that the two of them were really crazy. After all, he was only a level 3 pseudo-saint. Even a level 9 pseudo-saint strength that he had was given by the Divine Lord. It was a strength that he could only have in the source world. Under such circumstances, the two of them actually told him that they treated him differently because they wanted to become a saint. It was equivalent to an elephant telling an ant that it cared about him so that it could become a mammoth colossus. The old man and the Divine Lord looked at each other, sighed, and raised their hands to slap at Luo Fan. The slap from the two of them seemed ordinary, but Luo Fan found that no matter what method he used, no matter what power he borrowed, even if it was the terrifying power of the level 9 pseudo-saint, even if it was the terrifying power of the source world, he could not get rid of the slap from the two hands. It was impossible to resist the two seemingly ordinary hands. This, in fact, was also very normal. The level 9 pseudo-saint power that he had was originally given by the Divine Lord. How could he succeed in resisting the Divine Lord with the power given by the Divine Lord? The slap from the two of them hit Luo Fan's body in an instant. Then he felt a strange, invisible existence rushing into his body through the palms of the two of them. The existence of this invisible substance was incomparably mysterious. Although it did not have any physical form and did not have any texture that could be touched, Luo Fan felt that these two existences were so heavy, so terrifying, and so inconceivable. His body seemed to be a little overwhelmed under such a terrifying existence, and seemed to be on the verge of collapsing. The two strange, invisible existences circled around his body and finally sank into the depths of his body. They entered a place that even Luo Fan could not grasp. He could not even detect where they were. As these two incorporeal existences completely entered that place, Luo Fan felt as if his body had a trace of eternity and indestructibility, as if it could not be worn down by 10,000 tribulations, this charm. Compared to the charm from the old man, it was at least 1,000,000 times weaker. It was even to the point that Luo Fan could barely reach. It was because he could vaguely sense the changes within. This is the holy decree. In an instant, Luo Fan understood that the two strange existences that flowed into his body were the two holy decrees. Instantly, he looked at the boy and the old man in front of him and found that both of them seemed to have undergone some subtle changes. Although they were still extremely powerful, this kind of power seemed to have lost its source. It was as if this powerful source seemed to have been gradually drawn away just now. Originally, he could still sense an extremely faint, extremely dim, eternal, and indestructible aura from the old man. No matter how hard he looked, he could not find it. Seeing this, how could Luo Fan not understand that his guess was correct? You guys just passed the holy decree that you worked so hard to condense to me. Luo Fan was shocked. You're indeed the existence that condensed the prototype of the holy decree. Your senses are so sharp. The old man smiled and praised. The divine lord nodded with a smile on his face. He acknowledged Luo Fan's statement and the old man's praise. Why? Luo Fan was even more shocked. Of course it's to become a saint. The divine lord smiled. How can you abandon the condensed holy decree just to become a saint? Luo Fan was angered by their attitude. He suddenly forgot about the difference in strength between him and the two people in front of him and shouted, "We've all failed to break through to the saint state, and now we're being watched by 54 saints. No matter what happens in the future, it's impossible for us to become a saint in the devil realm. Under such circumstances, we can only rely on external forces to give us a slight chance of becoming a saint. And you are the external force that we're looking for." The old man sighed. Exactly. You have the possibility of becoming a real saint. We pass the holy decree to you to establish an unbreakable cause and effect with you. All we ask is that you bring us along when you become a saint in the future. The divine lord smiled. Luo Fan was speechless at this time. He stared blankly at the two powerful cultivators who were indulging in wild fantasies. After a while, he said, "I've always wanted to become a saint. I want to achieve immortality and achieve immortality. However, even in my wildest dreams, I'm not sure if I have a 1 in 10,000 chance of becoming a saint. Even I feel the same way. Seniors, are you willing to pass the holy decree to me to establish a cause and effect with me, just for this small chance?" 1 in 10,000. The divine lord smiled, but his expression was bitter. The old man's expression became even more bitter. "I believe that your 1 in 10,000 chance is credible. However, do you know what is the chance of becoming a saint if we don't do this?" In the end, it was the old man who spoke. "There's no need to guess. It's less than 1 in a trillion. It can even be said that it's absolutely impossible to succeed." Hearing this, Luo Fan could not help but smile bitterly. From impossible to 1 in 10,000 chance of becoming a saint. If it were him, he would also take the risk. The old man and the divine lord saw Luo Fan's expression and knew that Luo Fan already knew what they were thinking. They did not say anything more, but just quietly looked at Luo Fan and waited. They were not waiting for Luo Fan to give them a promise. They were waiting for Luo Fan to ask. After a while, Luo Fan asked, "What good will these two holy decrees do for me?" "We don't know much about the holy decree. You need to experience it yourself in the future. However, according to my guess, this holy decree should be able to guide the direction of your holy decree so that you won't go down the wrong path in the future," said the divine lord. Luo Fan did not know what to say. It was as good as not saying anything. This holy decree was condensed by the two of them when they tried to break through to the Devil Realm Saint. Luo Fan still did not know if there were any weaknesses in it and whether it was different from the holy decree condensed by a real saint. Under such circumstances, using this holy decree to guide the direction of the development of his holy decree was like using a ruler to measure whether the scale was right or wrong. No matter how brave he was, he did not dare to do so. If you don't want to do so, there might be another benefit. That is to allow you to peek into a trace of the mysteries of the demon realm's sages and comprehend them. Perhaps you will be able to comprehend some profound principles that are beneficial to your cultivation, allowing your cultivation to increase at a faster rate. The old man interrupted at this time. Luo Fan did not know what to say. Such an explanation was similar to what the ultimate divinity had said. Similarly, he did not know if there were any omissions or mistakes. If he really used this method to improve his cultivation realm, he did not know what kind of hidden dangers and drawbacks would be formed in the future. Chapter 1351. The Divine Lord and his disciple did not leave the source world. When Luo Fan asked them about the use of the Holy Decree and they could not explain it, they gave Luo Fan a lot of treasures that they could and could not use before sending him away. Although it's a great benefit, it's really not that useful to me. Hovering above the boundless sea, Luo Fan looked back at the new forbidden area in the demon realm that was covered by the fog. He felt a little helpless. What was shrouded in that dense fog was the source world. However, only people like Luo Fan, who was given the authority by the Divine Lord, could see the truth. Ordinary living beings, even if they were level 9 pseudo-saints, would not be able to see the true appearance of the source world. Instead, they would see what the Divine Lord wanted them to see. It could be a world that existed in any form. One of them might be a test like what Luo Fan and the others had encountered in the past. However, it was more likely that there would be one vile world after another, and it was possible that any cultivator would be killed. During the period of time that Luo Fan was floating here, he saw many cultivators flying over from afar. Although they didn't directly crash into the mist, they were all eager to try. It was normal for them to crash into it at any time. The way they looked at Luo Fan was as if they were looking at a competitor. It was obvious that they had seen a treasure appear and regarded all the cultivators who appeared there as competing with them for the treasure. Facing them, Luo Fan could not be bothered. With a thought, he casually picked a direction and flew off. In the blink of an eye, he had traversed an unknown distance of hundreds of millions of miles. He arrived at an uninhabited island and descended. He landed on the highest peak of the island that was less than 100 miles wide. Then, he raised his sleeve, and Hu Yun's figure appeared in front of him. At this moment, Hu Yun had already woken up. She had already woken up when she was still in the origin world. However, in the source world, she could not see or hear anything because of the divine venerable master and his disciples' presence. Due to their wishes, she could not see or hear anything. It was impossible to see what was happening in the outside world through Luo Fan's heaven and earth creator sleeve. It's all in the past. No matter what happens next, it has nothing to do with you. You don't have to worry anymore, Luo Fan said with a faint smile. Hu Yun's expression changed slightly. After a long while, he sighed and said, "As expected, my strength is still too weak. It is impossible for me to interfere in such a matter. Even if it's a saint, they are not invincible, let alone you and me. Fellow Taoist is thinking too much." Luo Fan smiled. Sages were not invincible. This was very obvious. After all, there was more than one sage. Since their strength was equal, they would naturally fight. Of course, none of them dared to say they were invincible. I will give this to you. With my current strength, it is impossible for me to keep this. Hu Yun gritted her teeth and took out an item. She then said to Luo Fan, "This item was obviously the origin world that was surrounded by layers of worlds. It was a magical world that could allow people to break through to the sage realm. Before this, Luo Fan might have had some thoughts about the origin world. However, after witnessing the encounter of the divine venerable master and his disciple, as well as the process of the old man breaking through to the sage realm, the origin world was no longer tempting to him. He shook his head and said, This is not the path that I am taking. This item is useless to me and will only bring me trouble. On the contrary, this item is extremely important to you, so you should keep it." Seeing that Hu Yun was about to say something, Luo Fan raised his hand to stop her and said, "There is no need to dwell on this matter. This matter is decided. If fellow Taoist really doesn't want this item, then just throw it away." When Hu Yun heard this, she finally sighed. It was obviously impossible to throw this item away. Even if this item could bring great trouble, even if it could cause her to suffer a disaster, as long as this item could give her a chance to become a sage, she would never throw it away. Even if she died, she would keep this item. This was the inevitable choice of a cultivator who aspired to become a sage. With a bitter expression, she finally kept the layers of worlds into her body. Then she said to Luo Fan, "I want to go to the Dongsheng divine continent to be a disciple of a sage. I wonder if you would like to go with me?" Go to the Dongsheng divine continent to be a disciple? When Luo Fan heard this, his expression changed slightly. He naturally knew what Hu Yun was thinking. After going through the divine venerable master and his disciple, she had truly realized how weak she was. She realized how huge the gap between her and a truly strong cultivator was, and how hopeless it was. It was because of this understanding that she had the idea of becoming a disciple of a stronger person. In her opinion, as long as she could become a disciple of a stronger person, her safety would definitely be better protected. Perhaps she even had the idea of taking out the primeval world and letting the sage guide her on how to use this item for cultivation. As Luo Fan thought about this, there was hesitation in his eyes. After a while, he still couldn't bear to see Hu Yun go astray because of their friendship over the past few days. He said, "I shouldn't interfere with your choice. However, I personally think that it's not a good choice for you to be a disciple of a sage." "Why do you say that?" Being a disciple of a sage and learning from a sage, the cultivation resources are endless. As long as a little bit of it is leaked, I'm afraid I can enjoy it endlessly. Why is it not a good choice?" Hu Yun said in surprise. Since Luo Fan had already started, he naturally didn't mind continuing. He continued, because the thing that fellow Taoist has is something that the disciples of the sages don't have. Moreover, they don't want to see anyone using this thing. Luo Fan didn't continue, but Hu Yun already understood what he meant. She knew that what Luo Fan didn't say was the word "become a sage." Moreover, the meaning behind his words was not that the sage didn't want anyone to use the primeval world to become a sage, but that the sage didn't want anyone to use this item to become a sage. "Thank you for your guidance, fellow Taoist. If it wasn't for you, I'm afraid I would have died without a burial place." Hu Yun bowed towards Luo Fan and said, "It's good that you don't blame me for talking too much." Luo Fan sighed. "Fellow Taoist has done me many favors. I'm ashamed that I can't repay you." Hu Yun sighed. "There's no need to talk about favors. It's just a small effort. This time, I almost caused you to lose your life." Luo Fan smiled. He said, Hu Yun didn't say anything else, but her eyes flashed with determination. She seemed to have decided something. She directly said goodbye to Luo Fan. Luo Fan couldn't tell what she had decided. However, it wasn't appropriate for him to ask too much, so he sent her off. Hu Yun nodded, and her figure turned into a ray of light, flying into the distance. After flying for a short distance, she became invisible, as if she had entered the void. It was as if she had left the demon realm. What is she trying to do? Such a thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind, but he quickly dispelled it. No matter what she wanted to do, it was meaningless to him now. What he needed to do now, it wasn't anything else, it was cultivation. That's right, it wasn't anything else, it was cultivation. It should be pointed out that he had personally witnessed the battle between the powerful level 9 pseudo-sages in the source world. Such a battle, although the levels were far beyond the limits of Luo Fan's understanding. Almost all of them were incomprehensible to Luo Fan. At that time, he had the wisdom of a level 9 pseudo-sage, so he could naturally understand those things at a glance. However, after he lost that wisdom, those things that he could understand at a glance naturally turned into bubbles and did not leave any trace in his memory. However, those mysteries were, after all, things that he couldn't understand. There were still some mysteries that were extremely superficial to them, and Luo Fan could still barely comprehend them. Although those things were so superficial to the ultimate gods, it was profound enough for Luo Fan. It was enough for him to understand many mysteries that would greatly benefit his cultivation, which would then turn into a driving force for his cultivation realm to improve. There were no signs of human habitation on the island, but it was not completely barren. In fact, it was the opposite. The entire island of more than 100 miles was full of vitality, with all kinds of wild creatures living on it. Luo Fan was currently standing on the highest point of the island. At a glance, the entire island was reflected in his eyes, but it seemed quite spacious. With a thought, Luo Fan lifted his foot and gently stepped on a mountain rock under his feet. In an instant, the mountain rock changed, and the entire mountain collapsed in an instant, then reformed in an instant. Although the mountain that was condensed once again looked the same as before, its characteristics had undergone a massive change. The entire mountain had become a massive world. It was a vast world that looked like a mountain peak, but contained endless space within. With Luo Fan's current cultivation realm and identity, even a temporary residence could only be a world. Only a true world would be able to accommodate him living and cultivating within it. With a thought, he stepped into that world. This world was boundless, and there was only one palace floating in the boundless void in the entire world. This palace was square-shaped and looked very simple and unadorned. Luo Fan entered the palace directly and sat cross-legged on the highest throne. Then, with a wave of his hand, light and shadow began to condense on the main hall below the throne and turned into two figures. They began to fight extremely fiercely and mysteriously. These two figures were none other than the ultimate god who looked like a boy and the old man who looked like a disciple of the ultimate god. Now, Luo Fan and the level 9 pseudo-saint whose name he did not know, the movements and expressions of these two people were naturally exactly the same as in Luo Fan's memory. In front of the level 9 pseudo-saint, although Luo Fan was an ant, he was a level 3 pseudo-saint after all. Needless to say, his memory was very strong. Remembering the scene of the battle between the two was nothing to him. However, the way these two people fought was the same as before. However, there were no mysteries contained in it at all. It was like a primitive man looking at a computer. It was impossible for them to understand how a computer worked. Even if they memorized the appearance of the computer and made a computer model in the future, could the model really have the functions of the computer? Was this a joke? Luo Fan's current method was obviously equivalent to the primitive man's simulation of the way the two figures fought. It was equivalent to a computer. He might be able to simulate the outside without any mistakes, but the real principle inside and the real mystery of it, it was impossible for him to simulate it. The battle between these two figures was repeated again and again in Luo Fan's eyes. The process of the battle between the Divine Lord and the old man that Luo Fan saw was constantly repeated in his mind. As for himself, he used all of his abilities to deduce the mysteries within, to understand the purpose of each of the movements of the two parties, to imagine what kind of profound mysteries they had added to it, to make them do such a thing. Of course, most of these methods were fruitless. However, occasionally, there would be one or two very subtle movements. It allowed him to understand a little bit of it. It made him realize that a light flashed in his mind and faintly opened a door that he had never imagined before. In this state, time gradually passed. In a trance. It had been a few years. Luo Fan had watched the battle between the Divine Lord and his disciple for billions of times. Every action and even every subtle change in their expressions had been analyzed by him countless times. Among them, the number of mysteries and deductions he had added to it was uncountable. Some of them seemed extremely ridiculous, but there were also some additions that did not seem out of place at all. It was as if the two of them really used those mysteries back then. It was as if they really had that kind of idea. The process was actually like a primitive man using his own wisdom to create a real computer based on the computer he saw. It was also an almost impossible project. However, according to the primitive man's thinking, when he worked hard in this direction, he would inevitably gain something. For example, when they saw a monitor, primitive people might not know what liquid crystals, kinescopes, or complicated components were in it. However, it was obvious that they could figure out that something was emitting different light by thinking. That was obviously something that could be done. If he was a little more ambitious and had a little more ability to execute, it was obviously not impossible to think of putting a torch behind a cloth to simulate a monitor and then using a shadow puppet to simulate the image displayed on it. In that case, although it was impossible to create a monitor, it was possible to create a shadow puppet show. That was what Luo Fan had been doing all these years. Through his deduction of the battle between the Divine Lord and his disciple, although it was difficult to deduce the true mystery contained in their battle, he was able to gain a lot of inspiration through this process of deduction, which allowed him to understand many mysteries that he had thought of before. It turned into a driving force for his cultivation realm, causing his cultivation realm to unknowingly begin to rise. At this moment, he felt that his cultivation realm had taken a big step forward compared to a few years ago. Of course, there was still a long way to go before he broke through from level 3 to level 4, but he was already on the way. However, he was no longer like when he had just broken through to level 3. It's still too difficult. On this day, Luo Fan sighed and raised his hand to look at the battle that had been repeated billions of times in the hall. At this moment, he felt that the true appearance of the battle and the true profundities had already been covered by the many mysteries that he had deduced over the years. Now, when he looked at the battle scene again, what he thought of was no longer the Divine Lord and his disciple, but his speculations and the various mysteries that he had added to it. Under such circumstances, if he continued to do this, it would not have any effect. On the contrary, it might cause his thinking to become chaotic, and it would have some negative effects on his cultivation realm. After the light and shadow dispersed, Luo Fan did not immediately leave this world. Instead, he slowly withdrew his senses and began to thoroughly investigate the inside of his body. He carefully searched for the 2 holy wills that the Divine Lord and his disciple had inserted into his body. The 2 holy wills were hidden in an extremely deep part of his body. It was even possible that they had opened up a place that was completely beyond the limits of what Luo Fan could sense to accommodate them. Under such circumstances, it was extremely difficult for Luo Fan to sense the 2 holy wills. Both of you, are you really just trying to form karma with me so that I can come and help you after I become a sage in the future? These 2 holy wills, are they really just pure holy wills? This thought flashed through Luo Fan's mind. This thought had actually appeared in his mind a long time ago when the Divine Lord and his disciple had inserted the holy wills into his body. However, he did not dare to show this suspicion at that time. At that time, he would have died if either of the 2 cultivators in front of him made a move. Under such circumstances, what was the point of showing his distrust and suspicion? Was it to give them the impression that he was wary of them, suspicious of them, and would not acknowledge them even if he became a sage in the future?